All right, welcome commissioners. Good afternoon, and over to you, Chair Harrington.
Thank you, Clerk Moss. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, May 24th, 2022 Washington County Board of Commissioners work session. This is Chair Catherine Harrington, and I'm joined by Commissioner Roy Rogers, Commissioner Pam Trees, Commissioner Nafisa Bai, and Commissioner Roy Rogers. Jerry Willie. The next item on the agenda is board and leadership communication. Who would like to go first? It's a race to the finish, folks. Go ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
I don't have much to say. I think you all have seen my schedule. The only thing that would be interesting, and this is probably particularly interesting to the chair, is that the 2017 Transit Committee, which I serve on, they were dealing with about 12 options for monies coming up, and it was an unusual meeting in that they were going through the options, and somewhere about the 8th or 9th one, they said, "Great, there's no questions. We believe you accepted these." I spoke up after a bit because they wouldn't recognize my hand and said, "Wait a minute, we're not accepting things. We're simply listening to your presentation, and we appreciate hearing where your investments are." But most of their investments are in buses and kind of capital needs that they have, which is not particularly something that I think any of us would oppose. But having said that, there are certain lapses in coverage, and particularly here in Washington County. I mean, there's a lot of areas that our frequency is not good, our connections aren't good, and so I'm hoping that we're going to talk about that a bit more at that committee. But what's important, I think, to the chair, if she's doing the Washington County component, is we need to advocate for some of the things that we have and need. So that's it. I know there was a big air show this weekend that Jerry was at, and he'll probably tell you all about that, hopefully. And I'll pass it to Jerry because I can see he's putting his hand up like this.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Thank you, Roy. It was under the table, but yeah, I was raising my hand. Yeah, we can talk about the air show. It was a great air show. It was Friday night show, Saturday and Sunday. All female pilots, both in military aircraft and in private aircraft. It was pretty amazing. The parachute team was called Misty Blues and was 4 women that's what they do, is they attend air shows and other events and jump out of airplanes, and they did a great job. So overall, it was just a great afternoon or weekend, and it was probably the best weekend weather-wise we've had so far this year. So very fortunate. It was beautiful. Shifting gears a little bit, attended the GPI board meeting last week, and the highlights to that was they have a new website that's got a lot of information about our region, about our state, and very well presented and laid out. And so they have rolled that out, and I think it'll be a great benefit to have that for certainly businesses that are looking to relocate or expand their operations right here in the metro area and across the state. But yeah, it's very good. As you know, the airport won the best in the US in 2021 through Travel and Leisure. And so there's obviously a lot of good things that we're trying to accentuate and still work on the other things that certainly need a lot more work. Megan and I attended 2 properties in Washington County that have that need some attention, and we're trying to get the owners to participate. One of them out in Gales Creek has been doing that and continues. I think it's a very good story. We kind of heard a wrap up on it today. We had animal control went out there, as well as some folks that were just trying to get it to be a little bit more presentable. The other one, Sellers Road, is a little bit more of a challenge. Has been a problem since way back into the 80s. We cleaned it up in the 80s. It's now worse than it was then, and so lots of work to be done there. But being able to physically drive by, it's all we did was drive by, look at the properties, took a few pictures to get a better perspective of what the neighbors' complaints are, and certainly how we can maybe help move ahead on this. So stay tuned. This will be a long process. We had my AVSAC meeting, our Aging Veterans meeting, and Rebecca's just doing a great job on there. We had the LGBTQ older event recap from her, and they also had a Veterans Pride event last weekend. So they've got lots of activities going on as well, and Rebecca's doing a great job there. The Salmonberry Trail continues to get lots of attention. Of course, we've been working with the Salmonberry Trail Intergovernmental Agency, and then the new organization, the Salmonberry Trail Foundation, which is the fundraising arm. We've now established an executive committee. I was not on the foundation board and still am not on there, but I am on the executive committee for the intergovernmental agency, and we're going to be working together. The foundation's board chair is Allison Graves, and Allison and I are going to be getting together and comparing some notes here in the next few weeks. I think more fun is tomorrow. Again, Megan and I are going on a road trip. We're going to tour the Game Hog Creek fire, which was a fire in Tillamook Forest in 21. And we're going to see a drone demonstration is how they can use drones, and just kind of boots on the ground tour of that facility or that area. And then we'll be back, of course, tomorrow in time for some other meetings in the afternoon. But let's see real quick. Let's see, we've got the WEA Mayor's Forum coming up on Thursday. I think there's several of us probably going to that. I have a preschool for all meeting with Sarah Poe, and that's coming up this week, and just a variety of other things. So lots of activity. It's a good time. If you'd like to have an update too on the golf tournament out at Pumpkin, I continue to meet with those folks and with our internal departments as well, and things are moving ahead. So thanks, that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to share? Hello, Commissioner Fye. I see you unmuted.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Commissioners. I'll be very quick, Commissioner Treese. I think we both raised our hand, real hands, not the virtual hands. Last week, I want to send my gratitude and kudos to Aaron Doyle and the team for I had the opportunity to participate in our government relations manager hiring process, the last end of it, and was very positive and good experience and good streamlined process. So Aaron Doyle, good job, and the team and Paige and everyone, Tanya, myself, and a few other top leaders for Washington County participate, as well as the sheriff actually too. So Tom, we missed you. I know you couldn't make it at the last minute, so welcome back. Last week I had JPAC as well. I think I might have given a quick brief update, but some of the things that were on the JPAC agenda were there were MTIP amendments, and this was to support for increasing funding for the I-205 Abernathy Bridge. And that request really brought up a lot of conversation around recognizing the reality that costs are increasing, and that was a robust conversation among the members. And this is something that OTC has already has approved the funding. And then another item on JPAC agenda was the FY 2020 2022 to 2023 Unified Planning Work Plan that went through. And then same conversation that we've had, same presentation that we've had here at our board also took place, and a lot of repeated information around the interstate bridge replacement. So that was the same presentation that we've had. I had really good conversation around Farmington with local elected leaders in Washington County, and representative from ODOT and Metro were also there. And we discussed a lot around safety concerns and lighting for Farmington, and also recognizing that there is a need for um, overall vision for that corridor. So that was a really good conversation, and look forward to continuing the conversation around everyone that was at that meeting. Um, and then I'm embarrassed to say, but I haven't actually had the opportunity to tour Central Cultural, and I did that last week, and I'm very proud, and met a lot of the staff. I was doing the GRE and sort of was two birds in one stone kind of thing, and had the opportunity to tour Central Cultural, and was a really great way to meet the staff, and everyone was wearing their mask. This is really it's also sad to say that the pandemic is still here. It always gives that, but it's still here, and really appreciated the work that they do. I got to learn more about, and some of their projects. And so thank you, Councillor Gonzalez, for that opportunity to tour Cultural Center, and look forward to learning more about that organization. And I think I'll end right there. Let me check my notes.
Could I ask
Yeah,
you a question about one of the things you mentioned?
yes, go ahead, Chair
The,
Hanlon.
the conversation at JPACT about I-205 and the Abernathy Bridge. I remember several weeks ago, we on the board had a conversation about that and attempted to craft a letter to help guide you through what we anticipated would be subsequent conversations around that. So I just wanted to pose the question to you, not necessarily for closure today, but did the guidance in that letter, and part of the reason for that letter was in reaction to request from Washington County mayors to support that project. Did that, or how did that help serve you well or not as you moved forward and navigated through those various conversations on our behalf? So
Yeah,
hopefully I'm remembering the context correctly.
yeah. I think yeah, that the letter was previous, but we supported, and I think Pam spoke at OTC in support of that piece particularly. So that was really helpful to push our voices at the OTC level. And then the conversation at JPAC was really the reality that costs are increasing and how people are seeing the cost, and um, and what it means for other projects when costs increase, and not necessarily the two. So that was
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thanks
Great
for
question.
helping me remember the context on those things. Great. Commissioner Treese, how about you?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for letting me go last. I was just organizing my thoughts here. You know, it's like being in class when you're kind of writing down things quickly. I too attended the air show on Sunday, and it was my first air show. So I hadn't been before, and I have decided that I have a very high level of anxiety when airplanes go way up into the air and they stall their engines on purpose and fall to the earth. my heart just would pound. But it's an amazing opportunity to see all the women there that are in that space. I also, and Commissioner Willie, you didn't mention attending the meeting on the OA. Is it OACE? It's the uh, Air Show Foundation funded program for Hillsborough high school students to have exposure to a variety of career opportunities in aviation. And so it was really nice to understand more about what that program was about, how it may or may not fit in the long term in relationship to workforce development, and how, what is our role in helping to promote that. So I just thought it was very, very interesting. So thank you for that opportunity. The let's see, the other thing, it was a busy week, aside from the election, which made it busy for many of us, but it was busy in that the next day I had the Community Action Board of Directors meeting, and it was a good meeting. By the way, I'm not sure if all of you know that Catherine Gallion is retiring. So she's going to be leaving, and her last meeting is next month. There was a program focus on the Help Me Grow program. It's a centralized access to assist families and professionals in connecting children to community resources. And then we went through the regular financial reports and all those things. There was a pre-referral steering committee meeting last week, and that was the first time that I have seen the numbers and the proposals for how to fund this. I will be sending those slides to everyone here so that you can see those things, and also the information from Echo Northwest on the feasibility study. There's a group of slides there. I do want to remind all of us that I'm sitting on this committee as information, and we did not vote to scope this process. We didn't give a thumbs up to scope this process. So I'm just keeping you in the loop. Commissioner Willie, I'm glad you're going to be meeting with Sarah Pope, but we'll get you those slides ahead of time so that you can see what the proposals are, at least what the options are. They did not land on an option, but the options are available out there. So I also attended the Homeless Plan Advisory Committee meeting last week, and that's a great meeting. It's really interesting to hear the different things that are going on. We did initiate the Homeless Plan Advisory Committee shelter subcommittee, so they're going to be working on sheltering issues and reporting back to the HPAC. Another meeting that was an interesting meeting for me last week was RDPO and the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization. This is only my second meeting, so I'm just kind of getting a feel for what's happening. But we did vote on an interesting issue, and it was it's called a COA, and oh man, do I remember, Certificate of Authorization. You get into these acronyms and it's craziness, but right now there's a certificate of authorizations for the utilization of UAVs, which are unmanned aerial vehicles. We frequently call them drones, but that terminology is going away as we look at unmanned aerial vehicles. So that certificate of authorization is in place for our EMS providers, but it is not in place for our sheriff's office. The sheriff's office continues to use the UAVs, but every time they do, they have to get authorization to do it. So this meeting there was a vote to authorize the utilization for these for our sheriff's office. I met with both Pat Garrett and Sheriff Garrett and with Latricia Tillman to talk about what the impact, what are the thoughts here in relationship to our BIPOC community. There's been information in the news as a follow-up to the protests about the use of these UAVs, and so my sensitivity was high there. And the RDPO in the beginning of this meeting is also just starting their own equity journey. So I brought up the issue. I had intended to, you know, I wanted to bring up the issue and say, have we looked at this? Do we have an equity lens on the work that we do before we get involved in these things? And so it was a really lively discussion, let's put it that way. But we did get to the point where we all voted unanimously to support the COA for our sheriff's office. But there was also, like I said, an understanding that we need to be continuing to look at these issues up front through that equity lens. So that was last week. This week, I have an MPAC meeting on Wednesday night, and that agenda is going to include an update on the placemaking grant. And these are funds that this funds projects that foster connection to place, centers social fabric, and involves and benefits historically marginalized communities. That presentation is going to come from Dana Lucero with Metro. And then we're going to have a presentation on addressing barriers to shelter siting, working towards the next winter. And that is going to be led by Councillor Lewis and community-based organizations and jurisdictional partners. So I just want you to know what's happening there. Then I have a meeting to review and approve the Washington County proposed survey process. I believe that that's with Commissioner Willie and with Ms. Angie. And then the Mayor's Forum, the WA Mayor's Forum. I am going to the Hillsborough Rotary Lunch to hear the presentation on Helping Hands Reentry Outreach Centers. And they're the same people that did the Bybee Lakes Hope Center. And then I'm having a coffee to introduce Joe McFerrin, who I worked with Joe previously at when I was on the board of WSI. He's the president and CEO of the Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center and the Rosemary Anderson High School. I'm going to be introducing him to Maria Caballero Rubio from Central Cultural, just to create some linkages there. So, busy times. And by the way, if you see me with ice on my shoulder periodically, I'm having a little trouble with the plate on my clavicle, and there may be an ice bag here. just let you know.
Well, I wish you the best with that. I will just share that last week I participated in the Washington County Visitors Association Board of Directors meeting on Thursday morning. Unfortunately, we were not able to meet face-to-face at Broadway Rose to see their capital improvements. Highlights really included the presentation of the proposed budget for the next fiscal year, and a short follow-up conversation on the golf event in North Plains, which has new dates now, June 29th through July 1st. So no change in terms of the board approved direction of just not participating, not advocating on behalf of that project. Also, last Thursday was the Center for Addictions Treatment and Triage Steering Committee meeting. The Washington County had multiple, not just the county, but a group of participants in the whole healthcare, behavioral health, addictions arena had applied for multiple there were multiple applications for the grant opportunity through the state for the opioid funding that totaled $32 million, 17 of which was the Washington County capital ask for the CAT. And in entirety from that whole collection, $20.7 million has been committed, though it's not yet clear what the granting program did to provide for the cost allocation. Staff has been having conversations with the city mayors of Washington County, asking them to contribute their opioid settlement dollars towards the CAT. So those discussions are ongoing. Then there was just a brief status update on the intensive services building as well as the community services building. There was a very short presentation on a de-stigma campaign with a theme of "you know me," as in you know me as members of your community. But I have had either difficulties myself or family members, or I'm your coworker having challenges with substance abuse. The steering committee is changing their meeting set to now meet every other month for 1 hour. So things continue to be to move along there. The team is putting forward an RFP, if I'm using the right phrase, for an architecture design firm to work with the an RFP for an architectural firm to move forward with the design work on the intensive services building. So that was that. Then on Monday, I participated as your representative to the Supportive Housing Services Oversight Committee at Metro. And I will be following up, sending you information from current collections for the income tax revenues, as well as a presentation on the estimate for next fiscal year, which will be the first full fiscal year. So current estimate is that there will be $225 million, and that's based upon state data. By comparison, the current fiscal year has $180 million. And also next fiscal year, the distribution to each county will match the actual collections versus the proposed distribution that the voters approved for the first year, since there needed to be some framework for the experience to move forward. There was also a brief presentation on the Tri-County Planning Body. There were a lot of questions. I thought the slides did a good job of trying to address questions from the committee about how the Tri-County Planning Body compares to the Oversight Committee and the role of the local implementation plans. An analogy was used, and that is one that of the county LIPs being a lot like the bones in a skeleton, and then this Tri-County Planning Body providing connective tissue so that there is a connection from the county programs to the regional system, since this is a regional problem that we're trying to solve together. I also was it just last night? Yes, it was just last night. I attended the annual WC CAN meeting, where later in the meeting, they met and elected new board members and had a board meeting. But State Representative Susan McLean was speaking about state land use, and I wanted to hear what she had to say, as she works very hard, not only on behalf of her district in Washington County, but all of us here in the state. So she gave a brief overview on the housing crisis, the agricultural crisis, and protecting land, as well as water availability with the frequency of droughts. Um, Later in the agenda, I was asked to give a brief overview, and I spoke to where we're at with regard to our discussions and efforts around climate change. Then there was a lot of group interest and discussion around various related topics, divesting from fossil fuels, climate adaptation, and looking at the tax environment here in Washington, in the state of Oregon. So that's pretty much what has transpired for interactions over this last week, and onward ho we go as we wrap up this month of May. I'm looking forward to our roundtable next week. I will be I urge us all to take a look at the rolling agenda and the roundtable plan that will be in that packet, so that we have a good grounding on what's ahead of us this summer and into the remainder of, well, the next quarter or so. And I also wanted to ensure that we all had a reminder to look back at a memo that Mr. Carr supplied all of us, that our policy assistants are making sure to touch bases with us again. I know he sent it back in January. I read it then, but through all the different topics that we've been dealing with this year, hadn't closed the loop with it. And I know Commissioner Willie and I just had a conversation about it in our monthly one-on-one today. So I just wanted to highlight that to all of you to take a look at. And that's it from me. So onward we go to leadership communication. Ms. Angie.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. Good afternoon, Chair and Board of Commissioners. This has been an action-packed week. First, I want to give kudos to our elections team for a smooth elections process. We have a very talented team, and that was proven to be in place operationally. Unfortunately, on elections night, we had a significant technology outage, which resulted in our website going down, that I received a few texts from some of you about, and almost simultaneously as I learned it had gone down. It was actually much larger than our website, but what this proved is that we do have redundancy in some places. The elections results being held on the Secretary of State's website proved that even with our website going down, the public still had access to those election results. So that was the good news. Our staff swiftly went into action. We had what's called a dummy site that pointed community to the Secretary of State's website, as well as a phone contact card, so community would understand how to contact the county. We quickly went to social media and issued social media alerts as well. Our ITS team literally worked day and night to resolve this issue. What it ended up being is a hardware issue. As is our standard operating procedure, we are convening a cross-departmental team to look further into this issue, to assess the issue, what we need to have in place moving forward to prevent this issue. I will say, just continuing with the kudos, our ITS team did a great job keeping our departments and your board updated on the progress that we made. And I just want to extend appreciation to all employees for giving our ITS team the space to focus on fixing the issue and getting our operations back into place. as we move forward with systems investments, what had proven to be beneficial is moving some of our platforms to the cloud. That prevented our email, Teams, some of those critical applications from going down. There were applications that were interrupted, such as our HR system, our payroll system, more commonly known as our enterprise resource management system, which is a critical backbone. And so we will be discussing that further in the after action assessment. And our finance team pulled off amazing feat to also ensure that our payroll got processed in time. And this was occurring behind the scenes without significant service interruption. So just huge kudos to the team. And I see Commissioner Rogers has his hand up.
I didn't want to interrupt you though, until your report is done.
Oh, okay. Then I'll keep going to the next thing.
Please.
Okay.
Sure.
Yep. Juneteenth, this is the first year that we will be recognizing Juneteenth. On Monday, June 13th, we will be organizing a flag raising ceremony that your board will be invited to. Thank you, Chair Harrington, for agreeing to say a few words. And we would invite other commissioners who do want to participate in that event and share a few words. Please let Julie McLeod know if you're interested in that opportunity. I know our staff planning group, led by Brianna Jackson and Marcus Ford, is working really hard to pull off this event, and we're looking forward to it as a staff group. And that concludes my update. Oh, I saw my other note, supportive housing services. If your board recalls, the board determined to borrow the supportive housing services program general fund dollars prior to our revenues being collected. We have this last week successfully paid back the general fund because the adequate revenues have been collected. So that is closed out now. And that concludes my update, Commissioner Rogers.
Yeah, two things. One, there was a bit of news about how well we had performed in our elections, and I would agree. And they were comparing it to Clackamas County, which I think is an unfortunate situation. Have you had any contact with Clackamas County or any issues surrounding our assistance or anything that we need to do, or we kind of on our own and they're on their own?
The staff have been communicating, and to our knowledge, Clackamas County has not needed any additional assistance, but just as we are with our other departmental partners, we are on standby.
Thank you. It was kind of unfortunate to see that news article, and they were saying how well we did it and how unwell, if you want to use that term, they did it. My second real quick one is that, as you know, I kind of like a dog on a bone with that, with our budget for the future, and I noticed, you know, that we're doing a good deal of scrapping on what we're going to do to balance budgets as we're required to do. For every about 1% uptick, we're about $13 million short. That's our, on that $1.3 billion budget. So, are you tracking costs, and is that something maybe the rest of the commission may not be interested in? I'm interested in saying how much are costs upticking, because at 13 million bucks on every 1% increase, and we know that inflation's 8%, but we're going to pick up some with assessed valuation and other. We're looking at some significant issues. Is that something that you're tracking, and if everybody wants to see it, fine. If not, I would certainly like to see how you're forecasting and what you're doing in that regard.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Commissioner Rogers. As you know, we were focused on presenting to the board and the budget committee balanced budget, because that is our responsibility in a very transparent, open manner as far as the actions that we took. Mr. Rhodes is working on right now what cost indicators, fine-tuning our economic forecast so that we can really start right away having budget prioritization conversations. As Chair Harrington mentioned, on The roundtables are filled with rich content coming this summer. In June, Mr. Rhodes will be presenting as he rounds out his interim position, kind of his observations and his thoughts coming from a CFO perspective. And we will start to set in place what those next steps in that financial sustainability planning effort are. I will note that Greg Dunn, our new CFO, is joining and starting the county on June 1st. So we are in the middle of that, I'll say, baton transfer. And I do appreciate Mr. Rhodes' openness to even staying on longer to help us develop our financial sustainability plan moving forward.
Any other board questions for Ms. Angie? Okay, how about you, Mr. Carr?
Good afternoon, Chair. I have a couple of things I wanted to mention. Last week at your meeting, some folks testified about the Thompson Crossing development and a mandamus action that had been filed to basically preclude community input involvement in the decision-making process. I gave you an update at the time. On Friday, we moved to dismiss that mandamus action, and I will keep you apprised of what the court does in that. This kind of a conflict between state law and local law, and it ends up in depriving the community of an opportunity to have any input through the land use appeal process, and it essentially takes the whole decision-making process out of the land use appeal process and puts it into the circuit court, which is disfavored. So Rob Bovet did an excellent job of getting that together quickly and filed it on Friday. The other thing I wanted to mention is, as you probably may have heard, Dixon versus McLaren was the lawsuit involving the People for Portland initiative. Judge Bouchong in the Multnomah County Circuit Court yesterday, I think the day before, issued a ruling upholding the Metro Council's decision not to place that on the ballot. Under the special procedure for reviewing such ballot measures, that decision is final and not appealable. So other than submitting in a new initiative, there's no path that will get on the ballot this year. That's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Ms. Taniguchi Dennis, Clean Water Services.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and good afternoon, Board of Clean Water Services. The team is looking forward to the Upper Watershed Tour that's on Friday, June 3rd, and some of this board will be participating in that. And it's part of our partnership engagement initiative to broaden the understanding of the Tuolumne River and its watershed. I have some great news on the sewer monitoring work front. We're seeing a significant declining trend of detecting COVID in our wastewater. We're continuing to monitor. It's still elevated from where it was in April, but we're feeling positive about this situation. So we'll keep you apprised of it. We continue to be in stable operations. We do have 4 additional employees that are out for a total of 11 in May. So the team is raring to go, and they were very excited about this, finally, the summer beginning with this warm weather this weekend. So thank you.
So we had warm weather this weekend, but it was after we had some pretty varied, intense weather storms the days prior. Yes, Commissioner Willie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Diane, Chair and I were talking this morning about WEFTEC. Is that going to be a real thing this fall? Are we considering attending that? Could you give me a little bit of an update, maybe some dates?
Sure. Mark Dockers and I, in fact, just before this meeting, we were talking about getting the pre-planning. So we're looking at what the schedule is, and we'll be talking with the board and getting it on your calendar. So we're hoping to meet with VICOMS. That's the community from Laos that we've been partnered with to look at their wastewater issues and to be able to talk with us. So we're hoping that engagement would occur, and having the board there would be really great. So stay tuned.
And what's the date of that? Do you recall?
Yeah, you're
You
gonna
can get
catch.
back to me on that. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I'm
yeah.
just trying to block some dates out on my calendars, and
Okay.
that was one of them that popped up. So thank you.
Okay, very good.
All righty, well, we have a few, before we check in on the agenda for our evening meeting, I will note that we have a couple of draft letters to consider and close in on. Both of them are related to TriMet and TriMet applying for funding to the Federal Transit Administration, two different requests, one for bus and bus facilities discretionary grant program, and the other for a low and no emission discretionary grant program. I know, thank you, Commissioner Rogers. I know I've reviewed each of those and thumbs up. It looks like Commissioner Treese is thumbs up on both. Commissioner Fye and Commissioner Willie. Okay, well, that was pretty straightforward and easy. Thank you, staff, for providing those to us for consideration, and onward ho we go. So just to check in on this evening's agenda, am I correct? I know I double checked yesterday, but we have just one change to the agenda from the original posting, and that was the addition of item D1, which is under proclamations. Are there any questions with regard to today's or this evening's meeting? We have a consent agenda of 10 items, the LGBTQ plus Pride Month proclamation, and a public hearing on ordinance 886. No questions. Okay. And I also just want to highlight for all of our benefits, since I know we get a lot of emails, that staff has made the public announcement for our town hall in June. It's on Thursday, June 23rd. Yeah, I got it right for a change. And the theme will be support for older adults. So we all have the benefit of learning more, because we all have in common that, like it or not, we're all going to get older with each day. Okay, well, that's that. Just a few minutes behind estimated schedule. So we'll move on to our next topic, which is proposed garbage and recycling collection, low income reduced rate proposal. There's Ms. Samantel, and there's Thomas as well. Presentation coming up, so please take it away.
Thank you so much, Chair Harrington. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Board of County Commissioners. My name is Mira Samantel. I'm the Interim Director for Health and Human Services. I'm really excited to be here today with Tom Eggleston to share this proposal for a low-income reduced rate program for garbage and recycling services. I'm super impressed with the amount of time and effort the staff has put into this proposal, and I think it'll be a really great opportunity for us to consider this unique program proposal. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn over to Tom Eggleston to go through the presentation.
Thank you, Mira. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Commissioners. Nice to be with you this afternoon. Thank you for the time to present this proposal to you. As Mira mentioned, the solid waste and recycling team has been working on this project over the past year or so, and part of this effort is part of our overall effort to continue to enhance the equitable outcomes of our solid waste collection system. I just wanted to start off by kind of reframing this conversation and relating it back to the recent conversations we've been having about the franchise system. This is a great opportunity for us to think about how the franchise model that we employ to collect solid waste and recycling services in Washington County really allows us to live the benefits that we've been talking about. And those benefits, as a reminder, sorry, I'm fumbling my notes here, is equal, fair, and consistent access to services. We feel that this program really embodies that. Regulatory safeguards, maybe a little bit less of that embodiment in this program, Fair and just rates certainly is something we will be looking at here. And then also really importantly is the alignment with our regional vision and values to create a more healthy, equitable, and supportive solid waste system. The proposal we have here before your board today embodies the benefits of that franchise system. It's a system that allows us to manage our solid waste collection and make sure that it equitably meets the needs of our community in alignment with our community's values. Next slide, please. So a quick overview of the presentation. We're going to go through the purpose and policy question. We'll go through a little bit of a background, the reduced rate project goal and outcomes, the research and approach, and the parameters for the proposal, the proposed reduced rate itself, the program structure, and then a unique opportunity that has arisen out of the 2022 rate review year. Next slide, please. So a quick overview of the purpose and desired outcome. The purpose of this meeting is to provide your board with an overview of a proposed reduced rate program to deliver garbage and recycling collection services that are responsive to the economic needs of our low-income community members. Our desired outcome is for your board to provide feedback on the proposed reduced rate program and also authorize staff to incorporate the proposal into the 2022 annual garbage and recycling rate review analysis. Next slide, please. The policy question we're considering is, should garbage and recycling collection rates be adjusted to provide low-income community members more affordable access to essential garbage and recycling collection services? Next slide, please. A little background about this. Ensuring community members have access to garbage and recycling collection services is essential. When it's not appropriately managed, solid waste can create nuisance conditions and public health impacts for all of their community members, not just those that receive individual service from our service providers. We've also found through our recent research on this project that approximately 20% of our residential households that take service in unincorporated Washington County earn annual wages at or below 185% of the federal poverty level. This is about $49,000 or less for a family of four, or $25,000 a year or less for a single individual. We also feel that increasing access or increased access to garbage and recycling collection services benefits low-income families with more affordable services. It benefits the community as a whole with reduced instances of solid waste accumulation, nuisance impacts, potential illegal dumping, potential theft of services. And it also benefits our solid waste collection system with less folks in arrears on their bills, less collections efforts, and less starting and stopping services may be required when folks struggle to pay their bills. Next slide, please. So the reduced rate project goal and outcomes that we developed in this project. This was a project we did in collaboration with our CPA firm that helps us with our annual rate review process, Marina and Company. Our project goal was to develop an equitable garbage and recycling collection service rate that improves access for historically marginalized and low-income community members in unincorporated Washington County. And some of the desired outcomes. Oh, I would also like to mention this work specifically responds to or connects with the regional 2030 regional waste plan. Action 14 in the 2030 or goal 14 in the 2030 regional waste plan relates to solid waste collection rates and fees and services. And specifically 14.4 relates to providing community members in our residential sector with access to low income rate assistance programs. Some of the goals we are looking for, or the desired outcomes from this work, are increasing access to services, reducing financial barriers to services, ensuring we have reasonable and well understood collection rates, making sure our rates are responsive to the economic needs of our users, and also that we have a low income rate program that can serve as a model for regional partners as we all work towards implementing the 2030 regional waste plan. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the approach we took for this project. As I mentioned earlier, we did this project in partnership with Marina and Company. We started with information gathering, defining a success criteria, developing a model, and then simulating different financial scenarios. So starting off, staff and consultants met with a variety of stakeholders, including our certificate holders, the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee, community partners that manage low-income assistance programs throughout our communities. And we also referenced and heavily leaned into the community engagement materials conducted as part of the 2030 regional waste planning process, specifically as they are related to rates for solid waste services. The next step was to define our success criteria. We developed an evaluation rubric for different approaches We wanted to ensure that any new program would be sustainable, equitable, and effective if it was implemented. And some examples of those criteria we looked at were that the program is funded by the system itself. There's no outside external source of funding to fund this program. It's long-term, it's not a temporary program. It optimizes administrative and overhead costs. It is established in partnership with our certificated collection companies. It benefits underserved and underrepresented communities. It provides the same level of service across different rate tiers. It's accessible and easy to apply for. And finally, that it provides meaningful assistance where that assistance is needed. After developing our success criteria, the project team began to work through different program models for a low-income rate. They worked with similar programs in the area from water utility services, public transportation, and energy assistance sectors to identify best practices and develop benchmarks. Finally, the team simulated several scenarios of various approaches to see the feasibility and financial impacts of those approaches and outline different parameters to date. So next slide, please. We'll kind of go into the determinations. So the first part of the determination to be made was establishing eligibility and participation. Eligibility really speaks to who qualifies for such a program. Some of the aspects that we wanted to make sure that we considered and leaned into on the eligibility criteria was leveraging conditional eligibility, which is a concept that means if you qualify for this, then you automatically qualify for that. This is an important program to make sure that we reduce barriers for access to community members and reduce administrative costs for administering a program. We wanted to evaluate similar assistance programs and develop consistency and identify best practices in our community. We wanted to optimize administrative cost, reducing time and challenges associated with labor-intensive applications and money moving from different parties. And we also wanted to ensure those community members that needed assistance could access it and it was responsive to their needs. Throughout that consideration process, we have landed on a proposed eligibility of 185% of the federal poverty level, which I'd mentioned earlier. This eligibility criteria is consistent with several local and state programs, including the Tolton Valley Water District's program, Hillsborough Highlight, which is a municipal Hi-Fi program or Wi-Fi, the WIC program, and also the free and reduced lunch programs. It optimizes, again, our ability to use conditional eligibility. So if a community member is on free and reduced lunch or their children are, they would automatically qualify for this type of a program. And similar for WIC or any of these other programs. The next step is figuring out the participation. And this is an estimation of who accesses the program out of the eligible universe. This is a challenging body of work. So there's quite a bit of research out of the federal government, the national HHS, and also local programs and experience. Try to pick up on my notes, excuse me. We also explored participation rates with some local programs, and we've landed on 15% of eligible households electing to participate as a reasonable estimate. That results in about 2,000 households in our system. This seems low, and it felt low to us when we were doing that research, but we found similar programs like the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP, which is a state mandated program for natural gas and energy electricity, has about a 20% participation rates, and it's been around for decades, and it's a really mainstream program in utility assistance. TriMet has a reduced fare program. It operates at about 10% participation. And then Hillsborough Highlight is currently operating at about 17% participation, but they expect that to go down because they've rolled that program out into kind of selected neighborhoods that have more need than they expect the broader community of Hillsborough does. So as I mentioned, we estimate about 2,000 households in our service area, and that would represent about 3% of our residential customer base would participate. Next slide, please. Trying to evaluate the next, or think about the next parameter, which is the rate discount. We evaluated a bunch of different scenarios and really zeroed in on the range between 50 and 90% discount off the standard rate. Staff looked through the success criteria that we established with our consultants, and we really landed on 75% being the sweet spot. It provides a significant discount for folks that are participating, and it also has some shared accountability in terms of maintaining a small bill in that case. And you can see here a 75% discount on that residential standard 32-gallon service would result in about a $21 per month savings or a $250 per year savings. Next slide, please. So looking at this all rolled up together, we see our proposed parameters, an eligibility of 185% of federal poverty level, a discount of 75% off the standard rate, and then putting that into the magic calculator that our CPAs have developed, we see that we have a proposal or an outcome that would result in a reduced rate of about $7 per month for a 32-gallon service. And that's a full suite of services. This would also be available to all tiers of service, so not limited to a certain size container, anywhere from the 20-gallon up to the 90-gallon container. Maybe allows households to right size if they're trying to manage cost by reducing service levels. The standard rate pair, if we just use the system to offset this, would be about a 70 cents per month or an $8.37 annual increase, and that represents about a 2.5% increase in costs to offset those reduced revenues from the program participants. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the way the program is envisioned to be structured. We really want this to make sure this is a closed loop system. Some of the feedback we received from our solid waste hauling partners was that when we implemented a program during the 2020 using CARES Act funds, it was created with a fund of money that was used to pay off bad debt for community members that qualified. The administrative process of moving those funds around from a community partner to a hauler and the accountability mechanisms was really challenging. It sometimes took 5 or 6 weeks for those checks to show up, and by then more charges had occurred on bills, and so it was really difficult to manage. We really wanted to create a long-term closed loop system, and it really relies on the system offsetting different cost classes. So in this case, the program participant would be paying the reduced rate directly to the haulers, and the standard rate pair would be paying their rate directly to the haulers, and that rate would flow to the haulers, and then the haulers would normally pay their 3% gross receipts that they currently do to the county, and the county pays an administrative fee to a community partner that administers the program. This would be similar to essentially a subsidized section of the service, similar to if we had a really low rate for an extra can of garbage or an extra yard debris can, for example. If that rate is not paying for itself, quote unquote, that means the rest of the system is essentially picking up some of those charges to support that discounted lower rate. Next slide, please. We were excited to see an opportunity that showed up early in our 2020 rate review year. We will be back next month on the 14th to present the overall rate review findings to your board. But we quickly saw a potential opportunity in our preliminary results from how the collection system has performed in this last calendar year. The estimated system-wide revenue lost or needed to be increased for the reduced rate program was about $610,000. And we observed that the residential line of service is overperforming our 10% target return on revenue by about $632,000 this year. So that was good timing for the work of the reduced rate program. And we see an opportunity that might be here in our rate review season to implement a program such as this reduced rate program in lieu of a rate decrease. So instead of increasing rates, we could make the decision to hold rates constant, and we could implement a reduced rate program to offset some of those over earnings in the system itself. For the other lines of service, we'll be back next month and we can talk about those lines of service, but there's no proposal here to mix the revenue or the proceeds from between the lines of service. We did meet with our Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee last week, and they were favorably supportive of this concept and have provided a recommendation to your board to do this offset and hold rates constant in lieu of a rate decrease, implement the reduced rate program for your rate review coming up in June. And we also are happy to have support from the Hauler Association for this concept, as well as we worked hard together over the last year to come up with this proposal, and everyone is pretty excited about it. So next slide, please. So back to our policy question. Should garbage and recycling collection rates be adjusted to provide low-income community members more affordable access to essential garbage and recycling collection services? I'm happy to field any questions or considerations.
Commissioners, any questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Yeah, Thomas, great presentation. I just want to make sure I understand all the information you gave, and the policy question is, for my answer is yes, but we'll go back to the questions. These reduced rates that we're proposing is only for our unincorporated residents, correct?
Yes, correct. We only regulate rates and collection in unincorporated Washington County.
Right. So with that, have we had communication with our cities for them to consider doing the same program?
Yes, absolutely. So because this is related to a regional waste plan action 14.4, and that action was included on our regional 3-year work plan, which we've developed in partnership with Metro and our jurisdictional partners. There's a work group that's meeting quarterly to kind of check in on action 14.4 and track progress. Washington County is leading the work in terms of doing the research and developing a proposal, but we have a lot of interest from a lot of our partners, in particular Hillsborough, Beaverton, and Portland are really interested in following the work and trying to understand if this model could be applied in their jurisdictions as well.
So how long is it going to take us to put this program into place? So do we have a targeted effective date?
Yeah, we would. Our suggested effective date would be January 1st of 2023.
Okay, and the organization, going back to slide 11, regarding your program structure, where we pay an administrative fee to a community partner, they're the ones that are going to oversee the implementation of this program and identifying these households and getting the word out and all of that. It's going to take them till January 1 next year to do that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, we'd have to identify or select our community partner. So we don't have anyone under contract yet. We'd have to enter into an agreement with them. We'd have to work on application forms and processes. We have been in communications with a couple, and we've got an actual quote from them. That's how we came up with this figure. And they would administer kind of the eligibility screening process and criteria, and they would just be reporting back the results of their eligibility screenings to both the haulers and the county. And the haulers would simply adjust the rate code in their rate systems and start charging the reduced rate to those that names were on a list supplied by the community partner. So the time between now and then is getting those contracts in place and making sure we have all those processes up and running.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. And I like the part that you included the leverage conditional eligibility aspect of it too. I think that's really going to help streamline this. So that was a great idea as well. So I don't have any other questions. I think that's a great program.
Thank you. We are part of the conditional eligibility. I know you didn't necessarily ask this, but I'll offer it. We had some estimates from other programs that were direct administered, and there was something like a 25% to a 33% overhead cost in terms of managing the funds and distributing the funds and doing the eligibility screening. Under this model, with the quotes we've received from our community partners, we think we can do it with a 2.5% overhead, which is pretty awesome.
Other commissioners, questions, thoughts? Go ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
I'll go next. It's a fairly de minimis rate, and I personally don't mind paying it because I see the benefits. But Tom, what's the legality of all of this? It seems like it's a sales tax on certain people, or in essence, an income tax. You're shifting burdens. We could do that, I guess. Anything that we license in the state of Oregon. I mean, it could be gas. That could be food products. That could be anything. And so, do we not have to refer? Do we not have to ask the public for their opinion, or can we simply shift costs between different folks by some action of this board? Have you done the legal research, and is this permissible? And if it is, should we even ask the public and say that's something that you feel comfortable with?
We haven't necessarily done a legal analysis. We've worked with our water service agencies and other agencies doing similar work, and we haven't come across any expressed concerns about legal issues. The board does have the authority in county code to set solid waste collection rates, and we do set collection rates based on a system-wide level. So there's lots of different kind of similar examples. For example, we provide collection services to our businesses that includes food scraps collection as part of their overall rate structure. And so some businesses might generate more food scraps and other businesses might generate less, but we've taken the policy approach that we want to incentivize and make it easier for businesses to divert materials from their waste stream. So I think it's a similar value judgment in that sense. But I see Mr. Carr's hand up and I would appreciate his thoughts on that too.
Thank you, Tom. I have not had a chance to research it, Commissioner Rogers, and I'm happy to do some more looking. You'll note, though, that this is a fee and not a tax. And generally, fees, you can have different rate classes for different people. The only defense would be an equal protection argument. As long as it's a rational basis, you can support a differentiation based on different levels of income, as long as they're not targeted at protected classes. So my first impression of this is that it's fine, that it's a fee and not a tax. Whether or not you refer to the voters, that's completely a policy question for the board, not a legal question. And I'm happy to take a little bit closer look at Oregon law and the differentiation between a fee and a tax and whether it could potentially cross it. But I'm sure Mr. Anderson has taken a look at this, and he's out this week, but I will double check it myself and get back to you.
Tom, I appreciate the Equal Protection Act is an important concept, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing the merits, because as I said personally, I wouldn't mind paying it. It's fine. But
yeah, under the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause analysis is generally just a rational basis analysis. So it doesn't get what we call strict scrutiny. It's just, is there an articulable rational basis for the government to do this? And obviously, supporting lower income members of our community is a rational basis that has been supported in other areas. But I'm happy to take a look.
Thank you. And would you also explain to me, just real quickly, how far does government's reach extend in terms of redistribution as far as of costs? Would that only be on things that we regulate? And would a license cause that? Or how would we, I mean, any business in Washington County, we might say, well, we want you to charge different costs, different people. How far can we go?
I'd have to take a closer look at that. I mean, that's not the question. Remember, this is not the government acting as a regulatory capacity. This is in our proprietary capacity. We are providing a government service here and charging a fee to recover for it. That's a different thing than our regulatory capacity.
Okay. Thank you.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Fye, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. Thomas, or Tom, thank you for your presentation. I really, this is really exciting, and I really appreciate all the work that you've done. This is exciting work. So I have a question about page or slide number 8, if we can go to slide number 8 quickly. And I'm very glad that with this implementation, we could help 2,000 households. But I'm wondering, and I see that you answered the leverage conditional eligibility, and I'm not sure I followed correctly. So I had a question about that. And then what like similar other assistance programs are you evaluating? And then I had a question about if you could talk more about responsive to user needs. I understand the bullet point before that. And then one of the other, I'm wondering if there's a way to come back to the board and demonstrate or illustrate 185% of the federal poverty line. Like, what would it look like if we were to help those who are under the 200% federal line, like federal poverty line, versus 250 to 300? So I'm wondering if there's a way to understand more of, and then how you could connect the overhead costs that you were talking about. So, and then within that same slide, participation, who access this program, beneficiary research. You're conducting a beneficiary research, so I wanted to understand more about that bullet point as well. And then with the with the 185th or the 185% poverty line versus the 200, how many households we're talking about. So I just wanted to understand more to see if we, what's our reach here. It's a great recommendation, and I appreciate the committee putting this policy forward recommendation, but is there a bigger impact than 2,000 households that we can reach? And I know we're going through a budget situation right now, so I'm not asking that we take on more when we have a interesting budget process going, but I just wanted to understand more of how many people are in the 200, how many households are in Washington County for the 200% versus that. I said a lot, Thomas, so I apologize, and I could try to
Thank you.
repeat it. But mainly, I'm just trying to understand the federal poverty lines and the number of households, and then a little bit more about this slide.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Fye. These are really great questions, and they were a lot of the same questions we were asking, the project team and the consultants were asking together. 185% of the federal poverty level is one of the more common approaches or thresholds used for utility assistance programs. So I mentioned Highlight, Tuolumne Valley Water District, SNAP is another program that uses that, WIC, and then the free and reduced lunch. So it is the most common program, and a big part of the landing on that is for conditional eligibility in terms of easing the process, not just to save administratively, but also to save the applicant or the participant of having to go through the process or the rigors of identifying and proving their eligibility and income. So we had a lot of conversations with TriMet because they have a reduced fare program, and they actually use 200% of the federal poverty level. And they gave us a lot of feedback about the challenge of evaluating between 200 and 185 and that 15% gap, and the difficulty they have working with those clients in their program, and how much effort it goes into kind of proving that difference and that nexus between them. And they're actually, at least their staff is reporting, they're considering walking it back to 185 just to ease that process of the administrative process. And again, not necessarily just to save money, but to save their clients from the trauma of having to go through over and over again of reporting their incomes and demonstrating their household value and earnings. So it's a great program. Great question. I think conditional eligibility led us mostly to the 185 level, and we have a list of programs that would match here. SNAP, TANF, LIHEAP, WIC, free reduced lunch, OHP, Medicaid, HUD, SSI are all programs that would line up with that eligibility threshold. So that kind of led us to 185. We have the research to know what 200 would look like, how many more households would be served at 200, and I can follow up offline with that. I don't have it in front of me, but we do have that research with us. And then in regards to participation, we did do a lot of analysis on trying to benchmarking participation estimates. And we do see, like, some of the really big federal programs, like your Medicaids and your Social Securities and these entitlement programs, how they have pretty high beneficiary participation rates up in the 60s, 70s, 80% even. But once we see the programs rolling out at the local level and focusing more on the utilities and these ancillary costs of living, that participation rate really falls down low. There's a report done by National HHS that looked at across the country, and it was between 12 and 24%, with 24 being like the highest gold standard. We actually used 24% based off that report to request our CARES Fund allocation in 2020 to offer our emergency bill assistance program. And we ended up looking at about $120,000 in an ask that we saw would be 24% of those bills in arrears. And we got 60,000 out the door before the end of the calendar year in 2020. So we did overshoot at 24%. So we really thought that, lining up with the existing programs in the community, working with our community partners like Community Action that does so much of this work, they thought this was a good estimate of where we would actually be on participation. So it's a lot of work, but it's, at the end of the day, it's a lot of putting, picking the spot and picking a threshold and going with it. So I think those are really good questions, and I'd be happy to kind of answer any more and see if our research has additional data, and we can kind of demonstrate what the difference is at different thresholds. I hope I answered your questions. Did I?
Yeah, you did. The reason why I asked the different breakdowns of the poverty levels is I know for the insurance is 300%, right? For children. Um, so could that be like, obviously that would increase the number of households.
Yeah, really, it's all about, I mean, the higher the threshold, the more eligible participants and the more potential beneficiaries they are, and the more the cost has to be spread out to the rest of the system. So it's all a balancing act. Absolutely.
Those are all the questions I have, Chair Herndon.
Was I correct in seeing a thumbs up at the end? I mean, in terms of the question, the policy question, Commissioner Fry?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Treese? Your thumbs up? Okay. So I just have a couple of basic questions. A couple have been answered through the conversation. But fundamentally, I would like to hear a little bit more about how do we know that there's a problem with access, to put it very simply, because I don't currently have a feel for approximately, if there's research or through your own experience working with haulers or whoever, we know that there are some households that simply aren't getting garbage service, maintaining garbage service. There's always a percentage that are in arrears, in payment, so on and so forth. Because clearly I see a solution, but I don't feel tremendously anchored on there's a problem to be solved by said solution.
Yeah, great
Sorry,
question.
I'm a little
Sharon.
numb on that,
No,
I guess.
You're fine. It's a great question. So 2 parts of this for us we've looked at. The first part is we went back to the regional waste planning process, and the process of Metro and local governments went out to local community-based organizations and hosted listening sessions with 8 community-based organizations, including 2 in our community, and heard from over 100 community members in those listening sessions. And this came out as one of the areas that they wanted more information about. They wanted to ensure that community members had more access to solid waste services, and specifically called out a low income rate or low income support program, in a sense, in the solid waste system, which doesn't necessarily exist very commonly across the system that we found in our research. So that was the data point 1, is that we heard from community through the regional waste planning process that it was a need in our community. The other data point we use really is we do track bad debt or bills in arrears with our solid waste collectors. And we were watching that really closely over the 2020-21 timeframe with the pandemic. As you may recall, we worked with our solid waste service providers to kind of do a moratorium on service disconnects and service termination, so that community members experiencing temporary hardship during COVID didn't get their garbage shut off. We did see the bills in arrears go up. It was running at $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. There's 2 classes of customers really that I think our service providers feel that are in arrears. It's one that forgets to pay their bills until they see the red writing on the envelope and goes, oh shoot, and then they pay it off. And then there's the other customer that really struggles to keep up with their bills and does fall behind on those. And there's processes in place that after they haven't paid for a couple months, they start getting threats for service termination. And sometimes they pay up, but those customers are always bouncing along that kind of threat of losing their service. Also, in our conversations with Community Action, when we were dealing with the CARES Act program implementation, we talked a lot about behavior in terms of utility payments and what they see in utility programs. And they're suspecting that a lot of community members are paying the smallest bills the earliest, because no one enjoys getting a bunch of threatening letters from their service providers. So if they can pay this one off, they will, but that might limit their ability to pay off other bills. So we do feel there's a need. The cost of living in our community is really high. household, a family of four making, $49,000 a year, probably struggling to maintain basic necessities. And so we just feel that this is something that meets those needs and speaks to what we heard from community in the regional waste planning process.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that forward for me. I appreciate it. Then fundamentally, I'll say I didn't particularly follow slide 11 very well. So I appreciated how you covered eligibility and participation on slide 8, right? Low barrier, trying to ensure that households, whether they're singles or families of different sizes who meet this eligibility of 185%, if they're already participating in other programs, sort of automagically, they would be eligible for this fee assistance program as well. But then when we got to slide 11, I got a little lost in terms of how this would work. So I'm a household over on the left, right? And I'm trying to figure out, who do I go to say, hey, I hear there's this program, or, I have this bill, and maybe the bill says, hey, if you are a lower income household, we have an opportunity for you, just like other utility companies do. So yes, there can be multiple doors of entry, whether it's through the hauler, through the county, or some community partner, right, advertising the program. So I'm trying to figure out, how does this, either there's an arrow from community partner over to hauler, or I don't know. I don't get it, Thomas. Sorry.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I think the biggest thing that I'd point out about this slide, and I totally understand what you're saying, this is intended to kind of follow the money. And a lot of assistance programs, like our CARES Act program, really would have had like another pot of money sitting above county, and it would have gone to community partner, and then standard rate, and it would have then gone to the hauler. And so it shows the movement of the funds, and we're trying to express that there's not a fund or special pot of money that's moving around that's funding this. It needs to be balanced. It needs to be managed on a separate. It's all incorporated into the system. We do have another image that kind of shows the administrative side of it, and the community, the participant communicates with the community partner, and then the community partner kind of sits in the middle of the relationship and then manages the information and the data back to the county and the haulers, and is that kind of relationship manager broker. So I appreciate that this slide doesn't do justice for that in terms of how the communications and information would flow. We would envision that the haulers would be part of recruiting or advertising the program to their customers through all their variety of channels. The county would play a role in that. The community partner would play a role in that. And we also learned from TriMet that they have a third kind of, or another tier of community partners who they call more of like ambassadors, where they go out and they promote the program, and they help refer eligible community members back to the community partner that's administering it. And that's one of the ways to help achieve their equity goals. And they partner with community-based organizations and organizations that serve our BIPOC communities, and they really ensure that information is available and readily available to them. So that's something we could explore down the road as we try to build this program and take it up off the ground.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question, but I appreciate the feedback on this slide because it's not there.
What I heard from you as you were explaining this is you were trying to help me, or us, understand that you've learned from other programs, including the recent experience with CRF, to ensure that the system, as you describe it, will work efficiently in keeping everyone whole, right? So I heard that, but I wanted to make sure that I had a better understanding of it, and you've left me with a feeling of comfort, so no worries there. I also want to make sure that in moving forward, so to your policy question, yes, okay. But I'm also thinking about how sometimes we talk about accountability and measurement, right? You can't get what you don't measure. But I recognize that this is a new program. We need to make sure that that the program connects with the intended audience or the large audience set, right? And hopefully we will get at least 15% of eligible households able to take advantage of that program. That's a great measure of success. I would like to see, because I realize I don't understand if there's a next step to actually put the policy into practice through the rate setting. You mentioned January, but I assume somehow there's something that we'll actually be adopting to operationalize this. But in my own mind, I'm thinking, we should probably give ourselves a few years to see how effective this is going, right? Because there's a building year, a first announcing year, then a building year, then a really another year to see. So how successful are we, right? So anyway, I don't know what you're intending. That's, I guess, my question to you.
Yeah, a couple things, thoughts on that. I appreciate that thought. So first off, for process, we will be back on June 14th to present the results of the rate review and work session.
Okay.
And if your board agrees with this policy question and gives us the direction to come forward, we would incorporate this proposal into rate review so you can see the big picture. And then we would come back on June 28th for formal action and adoption by your board. At that meeting on the 28th, your board would be taking action and we would see some of those. It would be a new rate sheet or a new section of the rate sheets that includes the reduced rate program. Going from there, I think the accountability thing is a really great question as well, and something we've thought about. A couple thoughts on that. Because of our system and the way we manage our system and our rates, we check in once a year on how the system's performing. We evaluate revenue, expenses, and we have a target return that we work towards. That gives us the opportunity to come in every year and look at those financials and look back and say, how did we perform last year? Starting in 2024, we're going to start seeing real data coming in on this program. And those rates are going to be able to kind of be adjusted real time every year based on how much is actually happening in participation. So this first year, we're making estimates, designing a model to lift it off the ground. And once we get it off the ground, we'll start being able to track it with real data. And that gives us an opportunity to kind of follow and monitor it and really see how it's growing over time. So that's really another benefit of our model and our system that allows us to keep track of those things. The other part of it, I lost, what was the other question? Sorry.
I guess I'm not sure there was another question, okay, but it was all related in terms of what you were thinking in terms of
ramp up
a future time point by which you would say, okay, so really, what I'm proposing is, that first year is building and launching the program. Yep. The next year is really trying to push it out there and learn more. And then that third year, really measuring and refining and going from there. But
absolutely, the consultants, we've identified that as maturity. So when does this program reach full maturity and hits what we estimate as the targets? We're estimating by year 4 we'll be in for full maturity based on working with other startup programs and other utility systems. So we could see 5% to 7% in year 1, 7 to 10, 10 to 12, and then up to 15, I think, in year 4. And again, we'll be tracking that every year, so we'll be able to monitor that program maturity in our rate review process. So 4 years is what we think it'll take to get to full maturity.
Great. Document that somewhere.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
I'm a systems thinker, right? I really identify with models, and I want to ensure that we have a framework in place for us to recognize our efforts, right? Through year 1, pushing it out and building that awareness. Year 2, measuring how effective are we towards that goal and adjusting from there, so on and so forth. So it's music to my ears. So I've heard all 5 of us are thumbs up with regard to moving forward. Do you have
Thank you so much.
any last items to close us up? Did you get what you needed for today?
Yes, I got what I needed for today. Thank you all so much. We'll be back on the 14th of June when we present the full rate review package with this incorporated into it. We look forward to that conversation.
All righty.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Thank you so much,
very
Chair
much.
and County Commissioners. Thank you.
Hey,
Commissioner Willie,
Chair,
go ahead.
I just want to say, Thomas, I got this in the mail today. Looks great. Good information.
Thank you. Yeah.
I got mine
200
at home yesterday, and it was interesting. I said to my husband, I said, "Look, we can put batteries in the glass bin now in a little baggie." And he said, "No, this little thing says just don't put them in the garbage." And I'm like, "Oh, we're not an unincorporated Washington County, so we have to find out what the city of Beaverton's going to do."
Yeah, it's really challenging. We manage education on behalf of the cooperative, so we have to educate to the most common. So we do our geo coding or geo fenced tools. We have an application and a couple other tools to really target unincorporated customers and their bills through their haulers to identify those that need to learn about the new battery program. So yeah, I appreciate the feedback though. It's a big mailing. It goes out to over 200,000 households in the county, and it's a stressful project, right, when you get up to print and production and final proofing. So we appreciate the feedback.
So your service may vary.
Yeah, it's challenging.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
All righty, onward ho we go. Okay, folks, we're just a couple minutes behind here. We have time now for a 15-minute break before we do a deep dive into the Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program. So is everybody on track for a 15-minute break? All righty, we'll see you back here then in 15 minutes, which will be, how about 5 minutes of the hour? Okay, great. We'll see you then. We're back in zero. I'm late. And here I was looking at my little network clock for 3:55. Did I say 5 minutes to the hour or 10 minutes to the hour? I might have gotten that wrong, folks. I said
5 minutes, Chair Harrington.
okay. So I can pick fun at myself. I'm not really too late.
No, and please don't rush us.
No worries. Back in two.
Chair Harrington, I'm just going to be off camera for a little bit. Just be back on. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. The little network clock tells me it's 5 minutes to the hour. And it looks like we have our staff speakers for the next agenda topic, which is the Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program 2328 update. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. And I did want to congratulate those of you who won re-election recently. So glad to be working with you all for another 4. So got a lot of work to do ahead of us for sure. So thank you. And so our topic this afternoon is really just our sort of monthly update on the status of the MSTIP, the Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program 2328 allocation process. So today specifically, we wanted to give you an update on the list of projects that has been submitted both by the county and by our city partners for consideration in this funding round, and those projects are now in the evaluation process. I'm joined by Chris Effenbach and Aaron Wardell, as always. Aaron's going to do the bulk of the presentation today, but before turning it over to her, I did want to just provide a little bit of the intro background. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So really our purpose and the desired outcome for today will just be to share the list of the projects, as I mentioned, that have been submitted, talk a little bit about the evaluation process, where things are, when things will be coming back, and then specifically we're looking for some input or direction from the board about reducing the list of project candidates down to a list that would total something in the range of $240 to $320 million, and that's based on about 1.5 to 2 times the anticipated available funding amounts prior to sending a list out for public comment. That's been a pretty typical process we've used in the past. Metro has used it with things like the Regional Flexible Fund allocation and other processes. So it's a good way of getting a list that's meaningful but not hopefully overwhelming to people who would be asked to weigh in on the process. And then finally, just talking about our next steps in the evaluation process, and then doing some work over the next month to prepare that list that would go out for public comments. And then I did want to note before we move forward too that in the presentation today and in your board briefing materials, you'll note that we've made some assumptions about the available funding. So we're assuming about $160 million would be available for projects. And again, one of the overarching assumptions to date has been that those funds would be roughly equally distributed amongst the commissioner districts to help ensure that we're providing a good geographic spread so that people around the county benefit from the program. And I did want to just mention that the $160 million is a working assumption at this point. We continue to work through our background financials for the program and assessing how best to move forward. And in talking with the county administrator and the CFO, as we've been having our discussions about the budget and moving along with this process of allocating funding for this upcoming round of MSTIP, we think there's a good opportunity for us to come back to the board sometime in the summer with discussion about how we do transportation funding and how we do fund other important needs in the county as well. And so we'll be looking to get that scheduled here, as I said, sometime in the summer. And I think, some of the topics that we've been talking about and commissioners have raised, and we've heard from mayors as well, can we bond more to help accelerate projects? And so those are the kinds of things that we've been working on and definitely want to bring back to you for some additional discussion too. Next slide, please. We'll come talk about policy questions, and then again, Aaron will circle back to these at the end of the presentation. So, obviously, does your board have questions about the projects or the evaluation process? Do you support reducing the project list, as we discussed, down to that 1.5 to 2 times available funding range? And then do you have any comments or concerns about our proposed approach for refining the projects that we send out for public comment? And if there aren't any questions at this point, then I'll go ahead and turn things over to Aaron. Okay, go ahead, Aaron. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for going ahead to the next slide. So I am going to talk through the submitted projects that were submitted by the county and by the cities of Washington County. We received 33 projects in total, and our initial cost estimates for those 33 projects exceeds $400 million. That cost estimate is likely to increase after we conduct a cost estimate review. We have contracted with a Portland engineering company that regularly does this type of cost estimating work and has done it for us before and has worked with Metro to do a consistent cost estimate review of all of the submitted construction projects. And that will help guide our final allocation as we move into the fall with a better understanding of how much these projects actually are going to cost. So there could be some cases where the submitted number changes quite a bit. There could be some cases where we were pretty close, but the important thing is to not get too attached to the cost estimates right now. They're very likely to change. Of those 33 projects, they primarily fall into 3 general categories. The first is construction, meaning shovels in the ground, a project we're actually going to be able to build, and that may include some design work. The second category are projects submitted for design only. These are generally the projects that you're going to see a pretty low cost estimate for because design work is only a percentage of the overall project cost. These are projects that weren't quite ready for construction dollars yet, but funding design keeps them in the pipeline. And then the third general category is projects submitted for a match or leverage for a federal or state funding program, possibly a competitive program, possibly not, but just a situation where we need a match in order to fund generally a very expensive project. There's also one project that didn't fit neatly into any of those categories. It's more of a planning study, and so we'll talk about that project specifically when we get there. The other thing I want to say before we get into the project list is that some jurisdictions submitted a number of projects, and some jurisdictions were very judicious and cautious and only submitted 1 or 2 projects that they thought were very likely to get funded and really closely met all of the outcomes. So when we start to review the project list, you'll notice that some districts have more projects than others. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's more need in one district or another. It just means that jurisdictions that fell within that district submitted more projects for consideration for this funding program at this time. And so I think that's important to keep in mind for managing expectations as we go through considering the districts. All 4 of our districts have a lot of needs for transportation projects, and these are all good projects that we'd like to see funding for. At this time, we don't have enough for all of them, and so we'll have to go through a prioritization process for the rest of this year to get to a final decision as far as what we'll actually be able to fund. Next slide, please. So here we are with the District 1 project proposals. District 1 had the most projects submitted at 12, and the preliminary cost estimate for this district is just over $152 million. The projects are not in any particular order on this list. The first set are projects that were submitted by Washington County. We have construction proposed for Blanton Street, which is the future alignment, interim alignment of the TV trail. We recently completed the TV trail concept plan. We also have Alexander Street in the Aloha Town Center for construction. The 170th Avenue Complete Street project, again for construction. And I should note both 170th and Alexander were funded through MISTIP 3E for design work. The 185th Avenue Complete Street project construction. This was a project identified through Metro's 2020 regional funding measure. The 205th Avenue Bridge replacement construction. This is another project that received design dollars in 3E. The next project on the list is a match amount for Farmington Road Complete Street project. This would be a match for state dollars to support a future possible jurisdictional transfer of that facility. And then the next set of projects on the list were submitted by Beaverton. We have the Allen Boulevard Complete Street project, and this would be a design-only project. There's a Canyon Road Streetscape and Safety Project, Phase 2. This is construction dollars that would supplement an existing ODOT-funded project on this stretch of Canyon Road. So Beaverton's looking for some additional construction dollars to supplement that. Beaverton also asked for construction dollars for the Watson Avenue leg of the Beaverton Downtown Loop project. They've asked for construction for a sidewalk infill project on a segment of Allen Boulevard that is east of 217. They've asked for design dollars for Hall Boulevard Complete Street plan. And then design dollars, this last project was submitted actually by the county in coordination with Beaverton to do the design work for the 175th kink in the Cooper Mountain planning area. And this would be a design only project. So any questions on the District 1 projects before we move on? I should note that we are preparing maps of these as well that we'll be sharing with all of you. The server problems last week interfered with our ability to complete maps, and so we were a little bit delayed in getting those out, but we will be preparing those.
Aaron, just a quick question, and I agree with one of the first comments, and that's we should whittle down to about 200%. 150 is really tough, but is that the intention per district? Because I know you're going to equalize on the district. So would the 200% list, let's use that number, would that be overall or would that be by district?
I think we'd like to be able to do it by district because when we are preparing this to go out for community input, I think that will lead to a much more manageable number if we can do it that way. So our first analysis will be to do that by district and then look overall.
And then secondly, is there on any, we have District 1 up, so pick on them. Has Beaverton proposed matches on any of this?
You know, they haven't.
I'll ask the same question about Tiger and Twall, I'm not sure what I'm going to say.
Sure. Some of these projects would probably lend themselves towards some local funds, augmenting them as well. And I think that's a conversation we could consider having depending on how the next set of conversations around this project list goes. I think that's something that typically comes up a little bit later in the allocation process about maybe MISTIP can fund half of this and then local funds could come in and supplement the rest of it. Stephen, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, and I wanted to add too, I think, Aaron, my recollection was that a couple of the projects that were submitted by the city of Beaverton, I'm thinking Canyon Road and the Beaverton Loop, those are really partial funding requests and so would likely be supplemented at some point with other funding sources as well. You said.
And that's very true. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So now we're moving into District 2. And so the first project proposed for District 2 is construction dollars for Saltzman Road. This is the portion of Saltzman that is funded through MISTIP 3E dollars. But the work that's been done on that project to date would show a need for additional funds, particularly if the realignment is the selected alternative. So that is why this project is showing up here as a request for the next funding allocation. We have next on the list a very complicated project that has been around for a long time, and that's the Beaverton Hillsdale Olson Shoals Ferry Road intersection project. This is proposed as a match. This would be a very expensive project to complete, and so this could be a match for, say, a federal grant program or a state grant program, since there's a state facility running through here as well, and we would need to identify the other funding sources for that. So just to note that this is a match, not complete construction of that intersection. And then you'll notice on the list, we have a number of segments of Walker Road. Walker Road is a pretty challenging project. And so we've split it up into individual segments in order to make it more of a manageable project for us to talk about and take out for community engagement. So we have 3 segments. The first is Parkway to Westfield. The second is Westfield to 123rd. That crosses the Cedar Hills intersection with Walker Road. And then the third segment is 123rd over to Highway 217. And these would all be complete streets, sidewalks, bike lanes, whatever additional traffic lane capacity we need on there as well. And each has a preliminary cost estimate of $15 million. The next 2 projects, so the next project is the Max Overcrossing of Southwest 185th Avenue, and this would be a match for a potential federal transit bucket of funds that would need to be identified going into the future. This was a little bit of a challenging project for us to categorize by district. It actually runs right along the border between districts 1 and 2. We assigned it to District 2 because that made the most sense to us, but there certainly could be some discussion about that. And then the light rail itself, of course, provides access to District 4 as well, because those are the stations that it's eventually serving. And so it's a little bit complicated with this particular project, but we put it in District 2 for consideration for now. And then our final project in District 2 is another segment of Walker Road. This is the segment of Walker Road that is on the eastern edge of the city of Hillsborough. And so this would be another complete street construction project for Walker, all the way over on the other side of Walker at the Amber Glen area. So any questions on District 2 projects?
I have another one.
Go ahead.
District 2 has always been unique because it doesn't have the city populations that some of the other districts have, so they don't have the matching concept. And as we try to equalize, there's not a lot of funds. So I mean, this one's way overprescribed. But is there any segments in Walker, for instance, I'll pick on that one, that could be smaller than the segments that you have indicated, so that something more than one little project can be built? I mean, Pam could end up with one project in her entire district just because of the funding. So is there any parsing that can be done that might be smaller?
We could certainly look at phasing the projects or incremental or interim type improvements that could be constructed in order to deliver something for the community. The problem is that they're just really complicated projects and it ends up making them really expensive. It's a sort of a rural road right now that's serving a very urban area. I will say that this segment of Walker Road is a little bit tricky as far as jurisdiction goes. It is partially Beaverton, and then actually that last segment of Walker Road is Hillsborough as well. And so there are some city borders that we're sharing for these roads, and that could be something for us to consider for funding going forward. Commissioner Willie?
Hi, yes. Well, I happen to drive down Murray, at least on Sundays as I'm heading to church, which is on Walker, Beaverton Foursquare. And they've got signs up already. So for some reason, I thought that segment, which I think is going from Murray, just not very far, just a few blocks up Walker, has been already paid for or at least allocated out of previous MSTIP money. Is that correct? So this is this is connectivity to that. We're fixing kind of something in the middle and then looking at both directions.
Kind of, yeah. And so the intersection of Murray and Walker was paid for in a previous MISTIP funding cycle. However, we don't have enough funds to get all the way over to Westfield Avenue. And so the Parkway to Westfield Avenue segment would be the continuation of that intersection MISTIP project, so that we can complete that.
So are we going to do those as one project? So is the first step of that going to be delayed? And then, because I mean, obviously, isn't there some efficiencies to kind of doing this all at once?
There are certainly some efficiencies if we can get out there and do the projects at the same time. And so if this particular project was selected, that's something we'd want to consider with the construction phasing for finishing up that intersection project. And that's a decision we make a little bit down the road.
And,
Has the design been made though for that section from Parkway to Westfield? I'm sorry, I'm probably getting too much in the weeds on this one, but
we've done just some very conceptual layouts for a project in that area. We don't have a specific design at this point. And I was just going to say, I think to your point, Commissioner, I appreciate that line of questioning about efficiencies and maybe pairing projects. The intersection at Walker and Murray is itself quite a big project, and then we'll also be doing the Walker Road improvements to the west across the Nike frontage, more or less in tandem with that intersection project. So we're already doing quite a large complex of projects that really run from sort of the Murray Walker across the Walker and 158th intersection in the upcoming couple of years. And so then now, as Aaron was saying, these candidates are all looking at additional improvements further to the east back towards Highway 217.
okay, which is certainly needed as well, both pedestrian, bike paths. I mean, yeah, that's a very busy street, and certainly we need to put those enhancements on there. That's for sure. Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Commissioner Truce.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, fellow commissioners, for your questions, and Commissioner Rogers for pointing out the uniqueness of District 2 in relationship to unincorporated area. I just wanted to make a quick statement. When I was talking with Stephen and Aaron early on about this, the Beaverton, Hillsdale, Olson Road, Shoals Ferry intersection, that piece, I personally feel it's our responsibility to get this project at least on the radar at the very least, because we've had fits and starts, and it is an extremely difficult intersection, as those of you who have traveled through it know. So I was really pushing to at least get into a position where we're starting to negotiate for additional federal dollars. We're negotiating with our partners, with the City of Portland, with others, to deal with this intersection now and into the future. So I just want to get that out there.
Chair Harrington.
For that project, could you speak to this road project and its relationship to community planning for that area?
Yeah, I think that, well, with the climate friendly and equitable communities work coming down from the state, we are probably going to be required to take another look at our land use plans for the Raleigh Hills Town Center. And so there could be quite a bit of connection between doing some additional land use planning, meeting the new state criteria, working with our community partners about some possibly exciting projects that could happen in that area, working with the City of Beaverton for sure, and then thinking about transportation funding that could be available. There are some federal programs that may be well suited for this particular intersection. We would, of course, need a match identified to be eligible for those. So I think there's quite a bit of work that we could do in that area.
Yeah, I think that is some important context that in a paragraph description of that project I would suggest it be included, because that area is long overdue in having some good engagement with the property owners, the business owners, as well as all the travelers through that intersection. Holy jamoly. It reminds me of when, boy, back in the early 2000s, I think it was, Metro did a study on 217 and had big billboards to try and get the travelers' attention to say, hey, we need your feedback on this. And because there are an awful lot of people who go through that intersection, whether they're on the bus or on foot or driving vehicles of various types. So anyway, I can certainly identify with the complexity of that one. And I don't want us to lose sight of our advocating for that match, just like I know we've already experienced from the city of Hillsborough for the Max Overcrossing project. So given that it's in primarily a UUA area, it's incumbent, at least on those of us whose districts touch this intersection, to make sure that there's some advocacy for it. Thank you.
A quick note, thank you, Chair. A quick note too, I asked Megan McKibben, if she would do a white paper on this intersection, what its history has been, where we've gone through these different stages. She's done a really interesting chronological sketch. So if any of you as commissioners are interested in that, or anybody else, we have that available too. Great.
And we actually have a tier 1 work program item in long range planning to do a little bit more of a look at this intersection as well, and lay out some of the future planning work and economic development work that we can do. And we had looked forward to working with Matt Craigie on that when we have the capacity to take that work on. So I think all these pieces are coming together pretty nicely. Okay, we'll move into District 3 on the next slide. So District 3, we have the potential match for the Basalt Creek Parkway Extension Bridge. This would be between Boones Ferry and Grams Ferry, continuation of our 124th and Basalt Creek Parkway project. The next item on the list is the Bridgeport Interchange Area Management Plan. And you'll notice this says plan in parentheses. This is the project I was mentioning earlier in the presentation that we think may not be eligible because it's a plan. It's not design, it's not construction, it's not a match for construction. And so it was submitted by the city of Tualatin. We've talked to our Tualatin partners. They said they understood and they agreed with our logic, but they wanted to keep it out there because they think it's a really important project that we should look for funding for from a more appropriate funding source. And so I just want to mention all of that. We are talking to our partners about this one, and you'll see a recommendation later that we certainly drop this particular project before we go out to the public because we don't think it's eligible. The next project on the list would be construction dollars for a complete street project on Edie Road in the city of Sherwood. The next project is from the city of Tigard, the Greenberg Road Corridor Complete Street Project, and this would be for construction dollars towards a jurisdictional transfer from the county to the city of Tigard. The next project is the Herman Road Side Pole Intersection and Complete Street Project along Herman Road construction. And the next project is the intersection of Tualatin Sherwood Road and Boones Ferry Road for construction and potentially additional intersection capacity at that location. And then we have some construction dollars for a turn lane at 65th and Borland. And then finally for construction dollars for complete street project on Boones Ferry Road. And this would run from Tualatin through future Wilsonville down to the I-5 interchange area. Any questions on District 3? Chair Harrington?
So first, let me explain, what was this action? I would really appreciate on that first project in the list to always call it the extension of the Basalt Creek Parkway, to make it clear that it's just finishing that piece. That's all.
Okay.
Just continuing to navigate the community need. Oh yes, quick question on the Tualatin Sherwood Road, Boones Ferry Road intersection. And I didn't double check with Google Maps just now. Is there really right of way? to do an intersection expansion?
I'm concerned there may not, I mean, there's always right of way. It may involve buying a McDonald's. So this would be something that our cost estimate would inform for us. Our consultant will go out and take a look at that exact situation and let us know how much right of way would be involved in any kind of a project here. We are concerned that it's a pretty constrained environment with the rail tracks and existing development in the area.
I thought the community already lived through all of that with the West whole business that happened. It's like, oh, I don't know if people's brains have healed from that prior experience or not, but I'm sure Commissioner Rogers could fill me in more on that whole business. So anyway, thank you.
I had one on District 3, and that last observation is right. The railroad tracks, that's challenging at best. That's a very difficult intersection. So, Aaron, I'm talking with some folks in city of King City, and they didn't get any projects on the list, but they had some in mind. I know the period is kind of collapsed in time in terms of times to submit. Did we do a robust enough outreach, and is there any opportunity, or we're pretty well at this point down the road, or maybe they just were talking in general and don't really have a project in mind? But
we did meet with all of our city partners. I had individual meetings or offered individual meetings to all of our city partners. Most took us up on that, and we talked through and sort of workshopped their project ideas with them. King City's only idea that they were thinking about submitting would have been design only on Beef Bend Road to support their urban growth boundary expansion area. In the end, they decided that they did not have capacity to submit that project at this time. They also felt like with their ongoing planning work and work with their community out there that the timing of putting that together may have just been a little bit difficult for them. And so there's other funding sources that could support that design work. And so we will continue to work with King City on finding funds to do that design, since it probably won't be through the MISTIP project. But that was the only project that they had thought about submitting for this cycle. Okay, we can go on to the next slide, District 4. So District 4 is where I'm going to say, don't get attached to this cost estimate. It looks like there's some room. In District 4, there's probably not, because I think that once these projects go through our cost estimating, these costs are all likely to go up. And so we'll probably see District 4. It won't be as high of a number as you're seeing in some of the other districts, but I think it will be over the 40 million. And we have a shorter list of projects here. The jurisdictions within District 4 were all very intentional about the projects they were submitting for MISTIP funding, and they really wanted to make sure that they were putting in projects that were pretty likely to be funded. And so that's why you see a more restrained list here. So the first project on the list is a rural project that was put in by county staff, and that is to do design and possibly construction of a roundabout or other intersection improvement at Wren Road and Sussbauer. And it says design in parentheses here. I think that we could also likely fund the construction here. The next project on the list is the Oregon 47 at Fern Hill and Maple Street. This is a Forest Grove project, and it would fund construction. We funded design through MISTIP 3E, and that work has been largely complete. And so this would roll that into the construction phase of the project. The next project is in North Plains, construction of a potential roundabout or other intersection treatment at Glencoe and West Union Road. And this would be supporting a lot of the growth areas around City of North Plains. The next project is from the City of Cornelius, a complete street project on North 19th Avenue. This would connect TV Highway up through Council Creek and actually cross with our future Council Creek Regional Trail. The next project is also from City of Cornelius, and that would be to do a traffic signal intersection improvement at the intersection of TV Highway 345th and South 29th Boulevard. Those all come together at one place there. And then finally, construction dollars towards an improvement at the intersection of Cornell Road and Brookwood Parkway. This would be somewhat of a match towards developer contributions that have been collected towards this intersection and likely done in coordination with some work related to the port and the airport property, possible realignment of Cornell Road. So it's not full construction dollars at 11 million. It would be a match for some of these other funding sources. Any questions on District 4 projects? Commissioner Rogers?
I had one there too. The roundabout at Farmington and River Road, where is that getting financed and when?
Farmington and River was funded in 3E. I'm looking at Stephen. It was E, right? Not D.
That's
Okay.
right.
And so that is in the design phase right now, and I'm not sure what the
Okay.
timing is for going out to bid on construction for that.
Okay, thanks.
Do we not have any local match for the Staley's Junction improvements? That's part of the Northwest Act. But that's still part of the whole MISTIP geography, right?
Mhm.
It would be. It was not submitted as a candidate project.
Who would have been the
We would have
proposer?
the county.
Oh,
Mhm. Yeah, it wasn't one that we put forward as a potential candidate early on, but it's an interesting idea. And I think that's one that we could step back and take a look at.
Haven't we been, if I can jump in here, haven't we been having more conversation with some ODOT money and maybe some federal money on that? Stephen, I can't remember the conversation we were having a couple of months ago about should we submit that project? And that was in the Northwest Act conversation.
Yeah, I believe that was, and Chris might be able to refresh my memory, but I believe that was in the discussion around some of the congressionally designated projects, trying to seek some funding. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. I needed to have a little refresh there.
But
Me too.
if I could just jump in, it is on the Region 2 list. I think through the work of Northwest Act, it's been added and raised in visibility.
As a side note with that, one of the pieces of information we're working on preparing for the WCCC, and then we will share it with you as well, is a memo summarizing the various ways we fund our transportation system, because that's some of the questions that came up at WCCC. MISTIP isn't the only funding source that's out there. And so I think that it will be interesting because we have certainly some federal dollars coming in, some state funds. And so it's an opportunity to look at some of the other ways that we build our system, in addition to our local funding sources and road fund and TDT and some of those other sources of funds as well.
So I think from my standpoint, from District 4, at least, I'll just speak to District 4. What would be helpful to me is the projects that have been kind of in the queue for a couple of these cycles. It seems to me like the Cornell Brookwood, we've been talking about that for a number of years, and I don't know if that was in the queue a couple of times ago or any of these other projects. I also have had conversations with the North Plains mayor about the Glencoe Road West Union. And of course, the important part about that is the significant increase in homes that they've got in construction just on North Avenue that's going to flow right through this intersection. So this intersection is going to be significantly in demand when those homes come online and pretty soon. So that's why I think that's there.
And we can prepare some of that background information as well. I know that the Oregon 47 at Fern Hill and Maple Street has been in the queue because it went in for design in the last cycle. And I think some of these others have been proposed in previous cycles as well. And so that's something that we can summarize going into the future. Chair Harrington?
my questions aren't so much about the 4 different district project proposals, but how will the evaluation criteria and metrics be used? Have they just been used as a yes, no, or is there a qualification or, an assessment range? And what does it mean that we included equity as part of the evaluation criteria? So that's what I'm looking forward to hearing more about.
I think that's actually a great segue into our next set of slides then. If we don't have other questions on the proposals, we can talk about some of the evaluation that we'll be going through and some of our next steps. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So we wanted to review the program eligibility and outcomes. And so just to summarize, the board direction has been that the overall program should be geographically and financially balanced. This question came up at the WCCC meeting last week. We are preparing a summary of the history of the program going back to 1986 and showing that we've actually done a really good job of being geographically balanced between the 4 commissioner districts. We have draft numbers right now. We're just looking into a couple of things and we're pretty close to equally distributed. So we were happy with those findings. You'll see that before your June meeting. The eligibility criteria for MISTIP projects is that they must meet multimodal needs, be on a major road used by many travelers. That's our system of countywide interest map that your board approved back in the fall. And then the projects have to rank as a high local priority, meaning that they are adopted into a plan document. We also established program outcomes, which were equity, safety, economic vitality, livability, and natural environment. And then we developed evaluation metrics that compare how each of the projects will meet those adopted outcomes of the program. Next slide. So a quick review of the evaluation metrics that your board authorized us to go forward with at your April meeting. We are comparing each of these metrics to the outcomes in these next 2 slides, and you'll see the outcome addressed by each of the metrics. So the first metric is reduces barriers and disparities faced by historically excluded communities. The next is improves equitable access to centers, jobs, schools, and essential community places and services, particularly for members of historically excluded communities, and increases equitable opportunities for walking and bicycling. Next slide. The next metric is increases equitable access to transit, increases vehicle travel reliability, improves safety for all travelers, enhances the built or natural environment or improves climate resiliency, and finally brings additional funding to Washington County. So when all of the projects were submitted, county staff did a screen against these evaluation metrics and evaluated with circles whether or not a project met or partially met each of these metrics. We have now shared that in draft form with the members of the WCCC Transportation Advisory Committee, and we'll be reviewing it at their next meeting to make any changes that they'd like to see in that evaluation. And that was the first piece of information that we're looking for to inform our project prioritization. And then if we can go to the next slide, and this talks a little bit more about how we're going to complete that evaluation. So in order to help us conduct a well-rounded evaluation process, the LUT staff evaluation will be reviewed by the members of the Transportation Advisory Committee. We also expanded our review to some of our technical experts who helped us develop these metrics in the first place. And so that was Clean Water Services, our Health and Human Services, Public Health Partners, Housing Department, and our Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. And so they'll all have the opportunity to review that. And then they'll also be conducting an evaluation that I'll talk about on the next slide. We also will be convening on June 7th a focus group of community-based organization leaders to have them also review this evaluation and weigh in on the project list. So these groups will all be asked to, and actually the TAC members and technical experts have already completed this, compare the projects to the desired outcomes, and then provide input about project priorities within each district, considering that we have about $40 million total to allocate for each district. So the next slide shows an example of what this exercise actually looks like. So we gave the complete project list, all 33 projects, out to the groups, and we asked them to pick the top 5 projects for each of our outcomes. So looking at equity, for example, pick the 5 projects that you think best meet the equity outcome, and then do the same for safety, for economic vitality, natural environment, and livability. And that was their first exercise. And then the second exercise was, using pretty approximate numbers and some judgment, allocate about $40 million per commissioner district, given the project list by district. And so we've been collecting this information from our technical experts, and we are certainly seeing some projects emerge near the top of the list as being pretty consistently highly ranked in terms of the outcomes and in terms of the prioritization by dollar amounts. So at your June meeting, we'll be able to share that information with you and also fold in the information from our CBO workshop. Any questions on evaluation then before we move on? Okay, we will move on to the next slide. Oh, Chair Harrington. At the last second.
Sorry. I was trying to figure out how I would
Mhm.
frame up my question. I'm really interested in hearing from staff compared to, and you each have different levels of experience over cycle, okay? But overall, the group has a lot of experience. I would be interested in hearing fundamentally, before you go through the full process and then after the full process, how you think this cycle is in any way fundamentally different than previous, and conversely, how does it feel similar?
So I can take the first attempt, or do you want to go ahead, Stephen?
Yeah, I was just going to share. I really appreciate that question. I think it's a really good one, and as we've been talking about this really from the get-go when we launched this process back last year, actually last summer almost, and really sat down to think about what has worked well and what we could do differently or better. And I really have to give kudos to our team and to our city staff partners and OEICE. I think we have really tried to keep the really good elements of the program, what really works well and what people have always appreciated about it, and really looking to, and I think you're seeing it evidenced here, really round out that evaluation process. Before, it's been a more perfunctory, I would say, process, mostly conducted by staff members and county and city staff members. And so I do think that being more deliberative about trying to seek a broader set of input into the evaluation metrics, and then also, as Aaron said, we're actually sharing our draft evaluations with a broader group of folks to just help us to round out our thinking about those evaluations. And so I think it's been an excellent evolution, and I think as we've talked about before, we'll learn more as we go through this process, and that will help inform any future processes as well. So as wanting to be a learning organization, I think this has been a really good exercise in stretching us a little bit and hopefully resulting in a better outcome.
Yeah, I would just add to that I think we, in previous cycles, and I wasn't involved in previous cycles, this is my first time as staffing for this, but I think in previous cycles we did quite a bit of the work internally with county staff, and then we shared it out. And this time we've been very deliberate on asking our partners to help and participate, and they've participated all the way through in developing the outcomes and in developing the evaluation metrics. And then they went through and they did this homework assignment, and this homework assignment that we asked the cities to do actually took quite a bit of time. We heard that back from city staff, and I did it for the county. It took quite a bit of time. So, we were asking for that commitment from them, but I think it's given us really rich information, and it's really revealed where we're on the same page about a lot of these conversations. I like being able to phone a friend, right? And so I think we've developed these friendships so that we can phone people when we need some help or we need some backup. And it's not just transportation folks. We really have expanded our relationships with our Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity. We've increased our relationships with Clean Water Services and with public health. And so I think there have been some good opportunities there.
Mm-hmm. And Chris just dropped a note for me, a helpful reminder too. So Erin and her team also coming up with the mapping misstep mapping tool, which again, just a good evolution of our process and the tools that we have available to us. And so being able to map all the layers of where do we have schools and Title I schools, and where are areas of equity concern, which considered a whole broad array of different factors. So I think we've really advanced the process quite a bit here. So that's just one more really good tangible example. And we've also shared that with our partners. So all of the city agencies have access to that tool as well.
And we know they're using it because last week when the website was down, we got an awful lot of emails and phone calls saying we can't get into mapping misstep and we have our big homework assignment due. Everybody still made it in time. It worked out fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to add in instead of text you this time, but I really think that being more upfront about what are we trying to achieve with these investments by listing those outcomes up front has been really helpful framework, just to keep people reminding about why we invest in transportation projects, what it does for us, and helping people think about that. So I thought that it's been a really nice framing, and particularly being able to make that connection back to our the commitments that have been made in our own transportation system plan for what we're trying to achieve.
And I think maybe one more thought I have just as we're thinking about this. So as we've really broadened the outreach that we're doing with this, and I think in terms of upping the engagement with our city partners, it's an interesting exercise because we're asking all of the partners to evaluate projects that their other local jurisdiction partners have submitted, right? So it's an interesting, and it's always happened, right? I mean, we've always done this, but it sort of reinforces the countywide nature of this, and I think that it is an exercise that's really helpful in just trying to help all of our partners and even us just remember that it really is a countywide system, and so a project in jurisdiction A may be of benefit to multiple jurisdictions whose residents and employers may rely on the ability to get their employees and their goods, to and from their locations. And so I think it really does just help to kind of reinforce that notion that it really is a countywide system and a countywide effort to really think about how we best prioritize those limited funds.
And Commissioner Fye, I'm sorry, I'm realizing you're on the phone and I haven't prompted you to see if you had any questions at this juncture. I'm catching her by surprise. So you have a few more slides, I know.
We do. We have a few more to get through, and Commissioner Fye can jump in anytime if she has a question. So this next slide is talking about our recommended refinement approach, and this is something that we'll be developing over the next set of meetings that we have with the WCCC's Transportation Advisory Committee, with the WCCC, and then we'll bring it back to you at your June 28th meeting. So our staff recommended approach for getting to a refined list at about 200% per commissioner district is to remove that one project determined to be ineligible, and then to consider the input that we've received from the TAC technical experts and our community-based organization leadership to prepare a staff level recommendation, and then consider the WCCC's recommendation at their June meeting and bring all of that back to you on June 28th for your recommendation to go forward with a refined project list. I also wanted to share at this time, the WCCC's meeting was on Monday, and so last Monday, and so we have to submit our board packets so far in advance that we weren't able to wrap in what we heard from the WCCC at their first review of the projects. And so I thought I would just verbally share with you what we heard with them through that first review. There was quite a bit of discussion about the allocating the funding equally between commissioner districts concept. And so they asked for the historical summary of how we have allocated this funding, and we'll be preparing that memo for them. There was some discussion about, is that the right way to do it going forward? And staff told them that's what the board has directed us to do. So we can have that conversation, but the board guidance has been to continue to do it that way. There was some discussion about how the allocation by district works when there's a project that may be in a couple of districts, or how does the allocation work if there's a project that's in a couple of jurisdictions, but maybe isn't a high priority for one jurisdiction, even though it's a high priority for another. And these are all the political conversations that we'll be having through the rest of the year as we consider these projects and we see which ones are ranking the highest. There were also questions about how we can use MISTIP to leverage other funds, and interest in historically, how have we done that in the past? And so that's something else that county staff will be working on putting together. There was interest in finding out more about just what other funding sources are out there right now. We're all hearing about federal money, but maybe need to get a better handle on what's available or what these projects may be eligible for. And so that's something that we're working on collecting. And there was interest in knowing what jurisdictions are planning on applying for with the grant programs that we are aware of. So for example, raise grants that are going in and things like that. So we'll be working with the TAC members at their next meeting to find out a little bit more from them. And then just some general comments. We had a comment that it's better to do fewer projects with full funding than underfund a lot of projects and end up with problems down the road when we can't complete them. There was a project, or another comment about interest in seeing the projects described specifically by the outcomes. And so that is something that we'll be doing as we pull together our evaluation information that we collect from all of our partners. So we'll be bringing back quite a bit of information. And as I said earlier, we are preparing the maps of these projects as well. And so we can share those because I know that will be of interest and we just weren't able to get them done before this meeting, but we will be sharing those out with people. Next slide. So our next steps, we have the TAC meeting on June 2nd, and we'll be sharing a recommendation to, or they'll be making a recommendation to the WCCC on how to refine the project list. They'll also be reviewing all of the evaluation materials that we share with them and providing any input and suggested changes to that. We will then turn that around for the June 13th WCCC meeting where they will review the tax recommendation and make a recommendation to you on the refined project list for community outreach. And then at your June 28th meeting, we'll be asking you to review the WCCC's recommendation and authorize the project list for public outreach. And if that happens on time, we're really looking forward to being able to begin public outreach in July and August. We're looking forward to being able to do some in-person events like going to farmers markets and the fair and having posters and asking people to tell us which projects they think really meet the outcomes of the program, as well as doing online open house and social media and some of the tools that we've been using over the last two years as well. So any questions on the next steps? Chair Harrington?
I will just comment with regard to those opportunities like at farmers markets and the fair. I won't be at all disappointed or surprised if the outcome of doing that outreach is that it gets people interested, but it's sort of a two-step or multi-step process where they learn a little bit, get engaged, and then go provide input via the web tools later.
I think that's very likely.
As far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very likely. And we'll be looking at channeling people to the online tools as well. And of course, then people find out about other county programs they may be interested in. And so I think there's a lot of good outcomes there.
Yeah. And hey, if it helps, you know, depending upon what my weekend plans are or evening plans in July, to have a commissioner attend to just pull people in and, you know, we pair up so that we're capturing the information. You know, if it helps, if it doesn't help, then I'll stay away too, but whatever works.
We actually have a meeting later this week to lay out our schedule for which events we'll be able to cover coming up this summer. And so that is something we can share out with the commissioners. If there is something in your district or anywhere in the county that you're interested in joining us for, we can let you know where we'll be.
Yeah, I think we have plenty of farmers markets probably in all 4 districts, so we would welcome the opportunity to see our district commissioners and you, Chair, at any and all.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. We just have a couple more. So this is our funding allocation timeline. You've seen this graphic before. We've moved to the "We Are Here" arrow. We are in May through June, which is reviewing the submitted projects, and we're moving towards that July milestone of beginning community engagement around the project list. And next slide is back to the policy questions. So Stephen reviewed these at the beginning of the presentation. Does your board have questions about the project submittals or evaluation process? Does your board support reducing the project list to 1.5 to 2 times the amount of available funding for each commissioner district prior to its release? And does your board support staff's proposed approach to refining the project list for public comment?
So commissioners, who's ambitious? 1, 2, 3, go.
I'll go first.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Rogers.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up.
I just have
hand wave, hand wave, hand wave.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Roy's answer, everybody else's answer. Yes, fine with this. How's that actually going to work for District 4? Because mine came in at 39.5, and you know, comment was made that it's going to go higher than that, but I'm still probably even at that going to stay below the 1.5 to 2, right? So
All those in
it's just-
favor of moving the 185th overcrossing project to Commissioner Willie's list, vote by saying aye.
That's not fair, Chair, and you know that. I'll take
The horse trading is
And
getting
I'm the
started
only
really
one
early.
laughing. That's even worse.
I might take a third as long as Nafisa agrees me and takes her third. So, you know, except
I'm glad you
Nafisa's
took
way.
it in good jest.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm surprised Pam didn't suggest it actually. No, I like this. I would like to have a little bit more conversation about District 4 and what does that really mean? Because it looks like that I'm just going to say I'm good with this and we move on. So
I think we're likely to not recommend any changes to District's 4 list. All of the projects appear to be eligible. And I think you're right, even though some of those cost estimates will go up, I think a bit, we're probably not going to get to 80 million, which would be twice the funding allocation. But we'll know a little bit more when we come back in June. And I think that we could have some of those conversations later about, do we want to consider a half allocation for a project in this district and the other half in another district? I think those are all conversations we'll have later on.
yeah, and I would agree with that. I would agree that, you know, like you said, some projects run the gamut. It's just like our TV highway study, you know, that covers 3 districts and overall. So certainly, yeah, good. I'll enjoy those conversations when we get ready to have them.
You know, I also think that we talked about parity, you know, and I understand from the standpoint that we want to make sure that our taxpayer dollars are represented locally and all those things. But I also think that when we talk about transportation, we're talking about movement and people moving around. So to some degree, you know, of course, I've got the heaviest lift here, but I also think that it's important that we think globally in relationship to our county as well as by district.
And yeah, Commissioner, I was going to sort of echo that comment, and I think maybe to Commissioner Willie's earlier comments, there will be some really challenging decisions that have to be made as we try to really pare a list back down to something that truly is fundable. And so, in a sense, it's almost easier to start with a smaller list, and then that means fewer, perhaps difficult decisions at a future date. But I certainly understand your comment.
Thank you, Stephen. Commissioner Willie, you had something more?
Just something, and going into the current MSTIP projects that we've got, and knowing that some of those projects that we're going to run out of money before we accomplish that list. Am I correct in that? And what happens when we do?
So is your question regarding the MSTIP 3E projects essentially?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good question, Commissioner. I think that is one of the topics that we'd like to come back and spend some more time with you to discuss as we're putting together a workshop to think about how we're doing this. Clearly, you've seen and heard it's not just the county, but at the WCCC meeting, you know, projects, not even just transportation projects, but all projects are just seeing pretty significant cost increases that are happening right now. We've seen that reflected in some of our projects as well. So I think that's a conversation that we do need to have too, is that we've got outstanding commitments that we have made through this prior process, and we want to talk about how we make sure to deliver on those commitments too.
And I think that was our last content slide. I think the next one is just our contact information. So,
Commissioner Fye.
oh, Commissioner Fye.
Erin, you've had enough of me, right? We've had some
Never.
meetings this week. I say that because just for context, Erin, Stephen, myself, and Chris have been meeting, and Brenda, about this very topic. So, yeah, thank you, Chair Harrington. And sorry, my finger wasn't You didn't catch me by surprise, but I was just not quick enough. I am. I'm in support. Your questions. You're actually looking for a no, yes, and a yes. So, Commissioner Rogers, you might want to correct yourself because I think you said everybody else on a trail of yes, yes, yes. But um, uh, aside on that, I'm having a hard time. You know, the list of projects that was submitted for District 1 is quite overwhelming. It's a lot. And obviously it tells the story of the need being great as well. I mean, every district we can tell that story, but um, because of that, so I'm having a hard time and I'm trying to figure out how do we tell the story of, equal doesn't mean equitable. So how do we um, relay that information? Because I get every district will get 40 million, but as we know, equal does not mean equitable. So how do we address that element? And is there an opportunity? Is it even allowed to take money from one district to another?
So the board makes the funding allocation decision. And so if the board were to make a decision to put more money in one district or another, that would be entirely on the board to make that decision by the end of this year when the program is allocated. To address your first question, though, as far as how to make things equitable, one of the evaluation criteria is, or one of the outcomes for the program is equity. And then you'll notice that we wove equity through our evaluation criteria so that it isn't a standalone, it's woven into all of the evaluation metrics. And so when we share the evaluation results and when we share how the projects were ranked to those outcomes, I think that will be really informative as far as how these projects are performing in terms of needs within our community, regardless of what commissioner district they're in. I can tell you from looking at the projects and looking at the equity index that we developed as a part of this, that most of the projects are in areas with very high equity needs across the 4 districts. And so that's information that will be available before your June meeting and that we're available to answer questions about when you have a chance to take a look at it and have more specific questions about that.
Okay, so I guess would that be the decision point meeting in June or a discussion?
In June, the decision is simply to tell staff to go forward with community engagement. And so at that time, if there is concern about maybe we've cut back a particular district too much, or maybe there's concern that some of these projects should go out for community engagement, even if it means more than 80 million in a district, that's the time for the board to have that conversation and tell staff which projects to take out for community engagement. The board will make the final decision on the allocation in December. So we still have quite a bit more time before we get to that point.
Okay, thank you, Erin. That's really helpful. So I guess I'm gonna give you a partial yes to the middle question because I guess we can. So how do taking your answer, how does that address to the middle question then? Does your board support reducing the project list to 1.5 to 2? And then you said something about if there's a significant reduction for a district and the community wants to be engaged. So I'm having a hard time connecting that to your answer.
Sure. So we, as a part of MISDIP, and we did this in the last cycle as well, we've done quite a bit of community engagement around the project list itself and tried to get an idea from the community which projects they would really like to see constructed. And so at this point, with 33 projects on the list that are 400 million in initial cost estimates, we just think that's a pretty ungainly list to take out to the community and ask for their input on, especially because most of the projects are not likely to be funded at this time. And so the idea of reducing it to 1.5 to 2 times is to make that more of a manageable conversation. We'd like to see the projects floating to the top for community engagement to be projects that are scoring really well on all the outcomes and projects that are pretty likely to be highly considered by the board for funding. So this is just a general guideline. It's not a set rule. We don't have to be exactly at 80 million for each commissioner district. If it makes a lot of sense to go up more and go out with, say, $100 million for District 1. I'm just throwing out a number as an example, and that's what the board says. Yes, please go get community engagement around this longer list. We won't be able to fund them all, but we can certainly have the conversation with the community and continue to seek other funding sources. That is guidance that the board could consider giving to staff.
Ah, I see. Okay.
And I might add, I think if we got to a 1.5 to 2 times list for each district, even if the board were to make some decisions about perhaps funding more projects in a particular district because of some countywide benefit or a larger area benefit, that's a decision that they can make. But I still think that having a list at 2 times the amount of available funding leaves a whole lot of opportunities for things like that to occur. And so, to Aaron's point, I do think that when in the past, we believe we've just taken too many projects out and it just overwhelms people, and our response rate has not been fantastic. Our last round, we actually reduced the list somewhat, and think we got a much better set of outcomes. So we're trying to walk that balance of giving people a lot of good projects to think about and weigh in on, but not also overwhelming them and turning them off from participating.
So if I could play the bad guy for you, Commissioner
Please.
Fye, Mr. Roberts, and Ms. Wardell on the District 1 list, just doing some fast mental math, which I'm not good at. It looks like the Washington County list in the urban unincorporated areas amounts to over 120 million of that list. And then the remainder, as if I heard you correctly, and if I noted it correctly, from Allen Boulevard on down is mostly related to the city of Beaverton. That's upwards of $24+ million. So we only have to look at ourselves for looking at how we made the District 1 list a very ambitious list. So perhaps Commissioner Fye, you want to suggest to staff which of those projects, 1 or 2 or more, come off the list before moving to the next phase? Just an idea.
I'm glad you actually play that role, Chair Harrington, because the meeting that we've had, I asked the opposite of that. So I'm actually interested in that. I think we talked about what are the feasible projects that could move forward in terms of, so maybe that might be Aaron, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, what I'd like to do is compile the information that we've gathered from our review to date and finish with the community-based organization workshop that we're holding on June 7th, and then maybe revisit this conversation with you, Commissioner Fye, and let you take a look at those results and then provide us with some feedback on which projects you think you'd like to see us bring back on June 28th.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think along that same lines, having more information about the project evaluations may help inform that decision. But you're right that we went into this knowing that we were submitting quite a few projects, and that does, as I said earlier, it does mean harder decisions have to be made at some point down the line. So, but I think having the evaluations will be helpful.
So if I could give my input?
Please.
I found, I spoke earlier about really being most interested in seeing how the evaluation will go versus I'm not tied up in any particular projects at this stage of the game, and they're all in my district, right? I found myself needing to remind myself that the decision point isn't July, right? That we're not trying to decide now. We're trying to figure out how do we have a manageable list that to take out for public input, right? And engagement. And we want that engagement to be meaningful, that demonstrates that We are trying to be very thoughtful about looking at community need and equity through using all the desired outcomes that we've talked about. And wow, what an art, you know? But I'm really pleased that we're going through this. And I also found as I was getting to this it's not a decision point, it's a refinement point. At first I thought, oh, well, with WCCC's recommendation, I don't want to know just what they're recommending, but I want to know why. And that's where I realized, whoa, Catherine, that's the appropriate question for later. You know, when we're engaged with WCCC about how we go from this, as Commissioner Rogers was talking about earlier, 150% to a 200% list on the whole, to evaluation and recommendations to get down to a final final set of recommendations and moving forward. So I'm pretty excited about how the projects have been evaluated or put together thus far, and how you've set the stage for evaluating moving forward. I do agree with you that there is some trimming of the lists, certain lists needed in order to go out with lists that are both demonstrate the need, but also where we don't end up with just, well, everything's important, right? We know they're all important. That's the problem. So then what do? Just throw darts up on a wall and say, well, okay, anything we know that in the long run, they're all going to be meaningful to our communities, right? If we fast forward out 50 years, it'd be like, okay, well, why did we get so tied up over just this 5-year cycle? And the reason we get tied up over it is because this is about people's traveling needs, whether they do so walking, bicycling, rolling, driving a car, a truck, a service vehicle. So how do we make people's lives better? So I look forward to the phases, and I appreciate all the work that's going into it. If you need me to opine more, I'm here.
Great.
But I don't think you need me to.
Yeah, and I just want to say I think we very much appreciate all the feedback we've gotten here, and just really all of the help that the commission has provided in really shaping this process. So, like I said, we're all on this journey together, and I think we're doing a nice job of improving the process as we go. And so, very much appreciate your help and support as we've been trying to do that.
Do you think you've received enough input and direction to address your questions in order to move further through the process?
I think so. I think we know what our tasks are, and we have definitely work to do. So we're going to get back to it, and we'll speak with you all in about a month.
Okie dokie.
Excellent.
Thank you, team.
Thank you.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our posted agenda for work session today. Thank you for hanging in there. We've just gone past the 5 o'clock hour. Commissioner Rogers.
Just one really quick thing for Tanya, so that we don't seem too callous in our meeting tonight. As you know, I've been seeing the news flashes. 18 kids and 1 adult was just killed in Texas, and our governor has lowered the flags to half mast. A significant event this afternoon, so you may want to just say something quickly, and or the chair may want to. I just think it seems like it's just not business as usual. We make some minor comment. So that was all.
Commissioner Rogers, to that point, we are working with our HR team to set up support groups for employees. We do have employees who shooting events are trauma triggering for various reasons, and we found that these support groups are very valued by segments of our organization. So that's already in the works.
I'll just say personally, I'm sick of gun violence in our country. And I'm pretty cynical when it comes to people expressing thoughts and prayers, because thoughts and prayers aren't going to prevent further events, and they're not going to heal the hurt of loss that folks have gone through. And I appreciate that Ms. Angie, as our CAO, you have worked with your staff and the other resources to ensure that our employees know that we care for them. But come on, country, get with the program. So I just, oh, I don't know what else we can do. Certainly as a county government, we're not about to outlaw guns, you know, as a singular county. So I don't know, it's so troubling. On that cheery note, and I don't know if I caught it correctly. President Biden may or may not be speaking this evening. So onward, ho we go.
Chair, I do think it's the recognition is important though. Are you comfortable with that, Chair?
What I'm troubled by is, so do we recognize these every single week? Do we recognize them when they happen at schools, when they happen in synagogues or churches, you know, and what does that do to the community we serve, you know, or is it just a statement of recognition?
I guess from my perspective, it's the statement of recognition and the trauma that it causes others as well. And you're right, it's not like we can, you know, gun control is not in our purview. But I think expressing the fact that we support our employees and our communities through traumatic times, I feel comfortable with that. I know you may think it's empty. I understand that.
Ms. Angie, if Philip could develop a statement about that, help our employees direct to such resources, that would be fine. But, you know, Commissioner Rogers has been sitting on the board for 38 years. I mean, there's an infinite number that have happened in that time frame. I know that as I was a Metro councilor for 12 years, there were similar events, let alone what's happened over the last 3.5 years. And it just feels like same events, different day, different community. So I don't know. I just don't know. So, but I do want to make sure that our employees know that there are resources available to them. I don't know what we can offer for our broader community. That's all. So.
I wouldn't belabor it. Everything you said is correct, and there isn't any right answer if you keep on recognizing and keep getting copycats. But I just thought maybe at the beginning we could say something to the effect that we're sorry for the loss in Texas, and we will be lowering our flags to half-mast in accordance with our governor's request, and we'll keep right into the meeting. I mean, to be absent of anything, I just kind of, I don't know. I don't disagree with anything you've said, Chair. It's
yeah,
different day, same tune.
It's awful. It's tragic every single time. So anyway, yes. Happy to, on your behalf, to read it, to make a statement. And to have you, you know, from event to event, there may be events that hit closer to home for you than others. And that's okay. And it's always okay for you to contribute additional remarks. Please know that. Please know that. So, okay. Anything else before we close today's work session? Well then, with that, we'll adjourn today's work session and see everyone back at 6:30 on the Zoom link for our evening Board of Commissioners meeting. All righty, see you later.